Hello there, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away and beyond the canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. It's raining where I am. It's a little gloomy, but tomorrow is supposed to be sunny day, so that's I'm happy about that. But yeah,
I go to SoCal once in my life, and it gets obsessed with trying to create the conditions to bring me back to SoCal by replicating the conditions here in Southern Ontario during the summer. There was a snowstorm last week. There we go.
yeah, I don't never get snow here, thankfully.
Yeah.
At least not until the world's weather ecosystem is completely destroyed. Then we'll probably get to deal with that.
Let's hope it actually doesn't come to that. Anyway, we're looking forward to tonight's episode. We're doing something a little different. We are looking back on what is unquestionably universally agreed on one of if not the greatest Star Wars novels of all time, Legends, canon, whatever, Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. I've got it right here in my OG version.
I have it somewhere in this house. I don't know where.
Somewhere. I think you have audio. You have it on YouTube.
I have the book too somewhere.
Yeah, I have the book. Fair enough. And it's the perfect installment of something we're gonna hopefully likely do every now and then, called a Legends look back. It's the Iron Canon, Legends continuity. We think about that. We talk about that, but we're diving into this book today, or today, this afternoon, this morning, as the case may be, to help us out. She isn't just looking all the way back, because she has fresh eyes and fresh canons all about it. Since she just read it for the first time, you know her. It's Anna. How's it going?
G'day there. Hey, gang. Hey, team.
Hello.
How you doing? Great to be here, back again.
Yeah.
When was the last time I was on? When was the last time?
I feel it was only a few weeks
Tales of the
ago.
Jedi when Halloween one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. That was fun.
Where-
That was fun.
Mhm.
Oh, it's good to be back. Good to be
Mhm.
back.
Good to have you
But yeah, it's gonna be a good show.
Loving the hat. Good job.
Thank
Way to do
you.
that.
I wore it just for you.
Oh,
Yes, I always wear it on these shows.
Yeah, there we go. I guess spring training is coming around the corner, so looking forward to that a little bit. I mean, the Wanderers, they're doing all right. The Mariners, they're doing all right.
Yeah, we're
TFP's
doing
doing
pretty good.
Yeah.
We're coming a second, I think, at the moment.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
not bad. Mariners, not the
Good
Wanderers. Western Sydney
Yeah,
Wanderers.
come on, man.
Central Coast Mariners. Come on.
Yeah. There you
Anyway,
go, there you go.
Venn diagram over. Yeah. There we go. Get a bit of plugs. Get those out of the way. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD for those listening, because Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can find all of our full shows on there. I put them up right after we record them here on YouTube, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, both Iron Canon and Star Wars Underworld, different accounts there. Check us out there. We can also find the Tractor Beam weekly comic book reviews up there. The comics come out Wednesday. I ostensibly read them Wednesday and ostensibly record my review on Friday nights, but there was a snowstorm, pretty massive snowstorm here on Wednesday, and I didn't get to reading them until Friday, and I didn't get to recording until last night. So they are up. They're not up on socials yet because I just haven't gotten around to posting them on socials. The tweet should come out at about 11:30 tonight. But they got The Blade #2 by Charles Soule, Yoda #3 by Kevin Scott, and Afra #28 by Alyssa Wong. Lots of fun stuff there. Also, YouTube memberships here on the Star Wars Underworld channel. Super chats as well on this Star Wars Underworld channel. Please do support us, chat with us, let us know. And the Discord, fresh link in the Discord, in the description below. Please do join us. Joel, any events coming up, or?
Not this week on the Discord, but we might be thinking about switching up the formula, possibly maybe doing a movie night. We have not decided yet how to implement it, but we want to think about doing that.
Yeah, and as always, just lots of fun conversations. Joel and I are in there. Hannah, you're in there maybe a little bit here and there, but
Yeah, I pop in. I pop in and out. See what's happening.
yeah, there we go.
Missed you last night during Fortnite.
Well, I've never in my life played Fortnite. I've never touched Fortnite.
I mean,
so that would have been
before
hilarious,
you'd never played Fall Guys. Apparently.
That's true. That's
So-
true. There's a first for everything. It'll be my first.
There we go.
True.
All right, we'll get to the rest of the plugs at the end. But first off, very briefly, I haven't had a chance to talk about it. Clone Force 99, Bad Batch, season 2, episode 5. One or two quick thoughts that I want to get to here. And before you guys can please do chime in. First of all, this episode, people accuse it of the F word, and we don't use the F word here on Star Wars Underworld channel. And I won't even say what that F word is. It has to do with storytelling and pacing of an episode of a season length. No, this one still had character moments. I mean, especially with Omega showing how bold she is, how adventurous she is, and far too trusting of Fee, I think. But she's a kid, so
Far too trusting.
Far too trusting. She's also bored. Got to be bored out of her mind,
just
flying cooped up with those grown-ups. And some awesome lore, I gotta say. I think this is the earliest in canon we've seen on screen, and here's the whole can of worms if Jedi Fallen Order counts as paper.
I call it Schrodinger's Zepho.
Schrodinger's Zepho, I like that, yeah. No, go ahead.
Because it could be a Zepho, but it could not be. But personally, I just say don't explain it. Just leave it to your imagination.
This referring, of course, to the honking mountain droid thing.
The mountain droid. That's a good way to explain it.
Yeah, which I mean, clearly there are some similarities to the those Zepho guard droid things. But yeah, I mean, my take is it's paper. Video games are paper canon. They're not likely gonna go for it with full on saying there's Zepho in the show, but you never know. Also, lots of Malachor weapon vibes. I think people have pointed that out too. And I thought about that while watching it. So just again, ancient lore, super weapons powered by crystal. I don't know if we'll get to Malachor at the very end of this show, and I promise you why. But all in all, I'd say it was a fun episode. Ignore the haters. Just pay attention to character implications. This is my exhortation to people watching and worrying about this episode. Because it had a lot to do with Hunter's ongoing debate with Echo about joining the fight in its infancy. I think we see this extra wrinkle to it where with Omega specifically, Hunter wants to protect her. She's just going to go and have a venture, and she might actually be the one to lead the Bad Batch into the fray, not because it's fun, but because it's the right thing to do. So this episode still gave us that kernel of character thought. Those are my thoughts. Hannah, what did you I'm sure you talked about it elsewhere, but what did you think of the latest Bad Batch episode?
Because I missed the Underworld show last week, so I don't think I actually have spoken about it anyway. This is like the first time I've spoken about this episode.
Fair enough. Okay.
Exclusive.
Exclusive segment. I echo a lot of what you say there. I think it's pretty easy to kind of flick over this episode. I actually found myself personally, like, I'm a big Clone Wars fan. I'm a big animated series 20-minute adventure episode fan, but I did actually slightly struggle to connect to this episode. But I did what I think a lot of people did, try to look deeper, see what character things were happening, and you're right. I think there was a lot of subtle character things happening with Hunter and Echo. A lot kind of happening in what wasn't said. They were kind of exchanging looks to Omega and Fee. And I think that's going to pay off at the end of the season. I think that all these subtle things are building up for, I'm theorizing that maybe the Bad Batch break up a little further down the line. So I think all these little experiences will add up to that happening.
Looks even behind the mask. They wore their helmets for a lot of this episode, which more than usual, but really well animated. Then just the body movement, the body language of Hunter, especially when Omega's going off into that cave. He's like, I don't know. There you go. Joel, do you have any thoughts on the episode?
Aliens. I love ancient aliens, and I love anything that promotes my theory that the Star Wars ancient past was actually even more high tech and wacky. Like Death Stars are baby toys compared to what the ancients that had back in the day. Just saying. It was fine. It was a fun episode. I thought they could have done a little bit more with the character development, honestly. I thought Echo could have used a few more moments to really narrow his case, especially since they were separated. But fun. I like ancient aliens and the giant walkers of death, so yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Probably my least favorite episode of the season, but I like the other ones just a bit more.
I would agree. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they got a high bar because it's been so great so far.
That's true.
That's
true.
To be fair,
high expectation. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Quickly moving on. I just want to get this in. High Republic news. On the Del Rey Star Wars Twitter account. I saw this. This is where I saw it the first time, but it's been all over on the Del Rey website. Cataclysm by Lydia Kang comes out April 4th. It's of course the next adult novel in phase 2 of the High Republic. It's really, I'll get to a little bit. There's the description came out, and I will read the description in full. Hopefully it doesn't take us too long, but
I could do it for you if you want. Just to
save my voice. There we go. If you want to read the description, and then we'll talk about it.
All right.
And it is a little spoilery. So, Hannah, if you haven't read Convergence,
that's okay. That's okay. I'm that far behind. I'm ready to get
spoiled. After 5 years of conflict, the planets Iram and Arano are on the cusp of real peace. But when the news breaks of a disaster at the treaty signing up on Jeddah, violence reignites on the beleaguered world. Together, the royal heirs of both planets, Fan Tuzen and Shiri Al-Brana, that's a lot of people, working alongside the Jedi. Thank you. Working alongside the Jedi, have uncovered evidence that the conflict is being orchestrated by outside forces, and all signs point to the mysterious Pass of the Open Hand, whom the Jedi also suspect of causing the disaster on Jeddah. With time and answers in short supply, the Jedi must divide their focus between helping quell the renewed violence on Emma and Arano and investigating the pass. Among them is Gela Natai. Natai, who turns to the one person she believes can unravel the mysterious but last person she wants to trust, Axel Greylark, the Chancellor's son in prison for crimes, has always sought to unburden himself of the weight of his family name. Will he reconcile with the Jedi and aid them in their quest for justice and peace, or embrace the past's promise of true freedom?
Ooh.
And last bit, I'll say,
all roads leads to Dalna. Gela and her allies prepare to take on a foe unlike any they've ever faced, and it will take all their trust in the Force and in one another to survive.
And the first little bit there, after the thrilling events of Convergence, the Jedi race to confront the Path of the Open Hand and end the Forever War. This is a real sequel to Convergence, I think. I mean, they've done a really good job of basically having these parallels. I think people, lots of tweets coming around. Phase 2, 2 adult novels, 2 young adult novels, 2 planets at war. The Path and the Jedi are kind of very much, not very much of a yin yang. I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. But to me, to my mind, this really continues the super tight, incredibly well planned out storytelling of Phase 2. I've shown the cover on here before. Gela was on the cover of Convergence, but she doesn't feature as prominently as the other 3. This description really makes it sound like she's actually going to be the lead character, even though Axel's on the cover. And interesting thoughts, about Axel and the dynamic between Gela and Axel was pretty intriguing, interesting in the in Convergence. I mean, she's a Jedi, she's a knight, she's not a Padawan, so there's only so far she's probably not going to break the rules, but there's definitely some spice there that I'll say. So it'd be intriguing if you guys, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on on this description.
Curious to see what Axel Greylark chooses. He's definitely got that kind of Kylo Ren bad boy, but not quite sure what to do with himself kind of vibe. Maybe he'll choose the right thing. Maybe he'll go even further. I don't know. He's probably dead by the time of Phantom Menace, unless he lived to be.
He's a human, and this is what 350 years before the Phantom. No, I can do math. 350 years before the Phantom Menace.
But no, I mean, I'm kind of curious what he'll choose. I mean, he got a lightsaber and kind of looking heroic in that cover, but who knows? Who knows? And what's the mother gonna do? I don't know. But man, excited.
And really curious to see, because in Convergence he only goes halfway into, again, unburdening himself of the family name and just the pressures of being the Prince of Coruscant. I mean, there's all these princes and princesses here. He's the Prince of Coruscant, not literally. It's not a monarchy, but yeah, just the expectations of being the in the spotlight and not wanting to embarrass his mother, and how it really vibes with a lot of vibes with Harry and Meghan. I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. Like all the pressures that they talk about and they think about.
I love
it. Like, oh yeah, in that system. But yeah, it'll be good to see. I think there's a redemption arc here that is convincing, that isn't cheap. That I'm looking forward to. Of course, here's a spoiler alert. We know from Convergence, Axel is in cahoots with the path. Is he gonna betray the path for the
Not
sake of the Jedi?
cahoots.
Yeah, in
Not
cahoots.
No.
cahoots. He's in cahoots.
I know,
Oh.
right? Cahoots.
No, not cahoots. The worst type of alliance.
Oh, yeah. The worst type of alliance. That's so
In
good.
cahoots. So, and again, that comes out April 4th. Get your pre-orders in. I mean, I should get my pre-order in, I should say. Yeah, looking forward to it. Again, I've been loving Phase 2. I know not everyone has. I think some people want a bit more substance to it. I think the Path of the Open Hand is all the substance I need. And yeah, again, really tight storytelling, really planned out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts there.
No, I'm good.
I just got to catch up. That's all I'm thinking.
Yeah, you do. You do. Whereabouts are you at now?
Oh, I think I don't even know. I like halfway through Phase 1, or
Right.
maybe like a third of the way through Phase 1.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mm.
I mean, you
I'm
can
still
just
getting
start
out-
with
I
Phase
th-
2.
I sort of
That's
dropped
true.
off Rising Storm. I gotta get back to that.
That's
I will.
But I mean, Joel, you're
chapters in.
pretty much caught up on Phase 2.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm doing Phase 1. I'm going back. I'm trying to get
Yeah,
all the
that's
little
true.
details I missed out.
That's the interesting thing. I will say they've given up on the whole you don't have to read everything, the whole you don't have to know what everything's going on, that you really do. At least you have to know Path of Deceit and Convergence to know what's going on with Battle of Jeddah. And it's to some extent the Kevin Scott comic book. But I will say,
I didn't think I needed that to understand. I felt pretty
yeah,
good.
it's true, but it does add some layers, and the Daniel Jose Older comic is going to add some layers to Battle of Jeddah. But you don't need to know fully what's happened with Phase 1 to start Phase 2. That much is true.
I felt that.
Right.
Yeah,
I will say, just reading Phase 1 though, I feel like really I'm only needing to know the adult novels. So far,
Yeah.
my love of Test of Courage has not really played into Rising Storm anyway.
that's fair. Yeah,
So it's that.
I like how we're similar there. I loved Test of Courage. I loved that
it was
book.
good.
That was such a great book.
It was small. that
It was
helped me
small. It was
Yeah.
small, actually, though. It was very small.
I mean, yeah, that's the Vern book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Vern's such a great character. So
yeah.
see where she goes. See if she grows up a little bit. In Phase 3.
Doing
Let's
an
hope
Omega.
she grows
grow
up.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Ouch.
That's fair too. Okay, I guess that's all we got for High Republic for news. And for Canon, that's all we got for Canon. So we can just pack it up and go home. No,
I
I'm kidding.
guess I have a question then.
So
I have
yeah,
a
so
question-
Joel, I have a question for you, or
No,
you have a
okay.
question for me. I don't know how we're doing this.
Yeah, I got a
Go for
question
it.
for you. I got a question for you and Hannah. Okay, guys, I got a very
Okay.
important question.
Oh, no.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis, the Dark Lord of the Sith. So powerful and so wise, he could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side that he could even keep the ones he cared about from dying. He became so powerful, the only thing he was afraid was losing his power, which eventually he did. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. Ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself.
Oh.
So yeah, let's
You
talk
do
about
it
the
so
tragedy.
well. You do
Thank
it
you.
so well.
I mean, it helps that it's your favorite character. I mean, you do whenever you quote.
You knew all the inflections too, like little pauses. Yeah. Oh, that was great.
I'm not sure what does it say about you, Joel, that Palpatine is your favorite character.
I like bad guys who just enjoy it themselves. No one gets the inflections down right every time they do it too. It's like I feel like I'm the only one who understands inflections.
Yeah, you get it.
Although I don't know. I thought I did a good job of the Clone Wars newsreel reading that summary.
Nice.
I lost track of myself a little bit. But yes, the Darth Plagueis novel.
Yes.
Written by the great James Luceno himself. Oh boy, there's so much to talk about. But let's before we begin,
do we start?
I guess I'll do with a little bit of backstory. Thank you, Matthew, for looking up some of this backstory for me, because I actually didn't know about this part until I had to relook again. So, Plagueis book goes back to 2008, the Heat of Legends, just when the Clone Wars cartoon was starting. It was going to be kind of a Qui-Gon versus Plagueis book, at least not the two of them like fighting, but kind of like the two of them kind of chasing immortality, and Qui-Gon obviously winning because he got to be a Force ghost and Plagueis doesn't. But then the book got delayed because of the Clone Wars 2008 show, and then canceled, and then back again in 2012. Which is interesting because that's why there's a lot of Clone Wars references in that book, because James Luceno was pulling from both the Clone Wars and a lot of Legend stuff. Which is why I really like this book, because it's very, very, very much a culmination of just decades of Legends material, and now this new stuff that was coming out in the time. And it's just a really fascinating book, and just really it's just something amazing to look at. But Hannah, you're the reason why we're doing this, because you're the one who wanted to read this.
I made you do it. I made you do this show.
I know. So I guess, Hannah, just give us at first your brief thoughts on this book, especially as an introduction to the Legends universe, but also just going in, what were you expecting, and then what your thoughts coming out?
Yeah, so going into this book, starting this book, the main reason is just because I know there's so much storytelling in Legends, and I've never read a page of Legends before. And, being a very overt and priding myself on being a great Star Wars fan, I was like, you know what, I should cover some of the main stuff of Legends just to see what's there.
You deep dive with this book.
Yeah. Right. And I was actually a little worried about how deep, how lore-y, how maybe just how far away from the saga and all the stories that I do know it will be. Like I think that's probably why I've avoided it to this point, where I was like, I won't understand it. I won't understand those stories. So that was kind of like my approach, but I was like, I'm going to read it anyway, just to see what it's like. And then, by about 3 chapters in, I was like absolutely hooked, and I was really, really fascinated with how it was going to go. And I was very surprised the whole way through of how actually connected this book is, because I really feel like, and I'll probably do it today, like I really feel like I could make the argument that like this book it's all canon. Like there's probably little tiny details here and there that it's like,
I made a list in our notes. I made a
yeah, great. Yeah, because I'm like, this could totally be absolutely canon. And but I really, really enjoyed it. I found myself really hooked, loved. I did listen to it. I did read it on Audible. But I would just read hours at a time, listen to hours at a time, really enjoying it. Yeah, that's kind of my surface view there.
Yeah, I think you lucked out. You picked a good one, because I do agree. If you had read, like, I don't know, Fate of the Jedi or Legacy of the Force, which is like 30 plus years after Endor, you're gonna be like, Jason Solo turned dark side. Wait, who's this person? Who's his sister, his wife, and Luke killing his cousin-in-law now? I'm confused. No,
so are they. So is everyone else. But to be fair,
later post Endor books got a little harder to kind of jump into compared to this. But no, I think you picked a really good one. I would agree with your sentiments. I'm curious, just for your sake, Anna, because how did you feel about the tone of this book? Because I've recorded when watching Andor. I've always said Andor is like reading a James Luceno, that's the novel author of this book, like a James Luceno show brought to life. And I always feel like Plagueis has is very that kind of quiet political kind of thriller like Andor, except just about space wizards and not space spies. So how did you feel kind of going into that? Did you notice any parallels between the two kind of tonal in the book, in the show, or?
Yeah, I can see that similarity, especially just with the there's something about the tone of both of those pieces of media. There's something about the darkness of it, the shadow of what is happening. There's something happening that we don't know as the audience member. Like that's very similar. But it's really funny because I wasn't a massive fan at all of the tone of Andor,
right?
But I am a really massive fan of the tone of Plagueis. So I'm like, it is similar, but why would I feel differently about it in two pieces of media? So I don't know, but I can definitely draw similarities there of just the darkness it kind of carries in its story, I guess.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in there with that. They both have very much this brooding weight of the depth of evil, just the cloud of evil landing on it.
It's just
the difference being we're tracking the architects of that cloud in this novel, whereas Andor kind of looking up and we're feeling it descend upon us and kind of choke us. And, I mean, but still, like the slow pace of it. I mean, this might be more relevant to season 2, but the time jumps and the way it's spread out over.
That's a good point. Yeah,
we'll get to the
we'll get to the plot.
But
I just want to say the tone. The very much this kind of the very methodical. Methodical is the way of putting it, right? I mean, I haven't watched Breaking Bad or whatnot, but like House of Cards, just the very pattern, just deliberate way of both stories that they proceed. Again, I mean, when I read Darth Plagueis, and we'll get to our experiences in a bit, but I read Darth Plagueis and was watching House of Cards because I think it came out at the same time, cheering for the bad guy, cheering for, is he gonna actually win this game of perfect pure self-interest that he set up for himself, and he being either Plagueis or Palpatine or what's his face's character, Kevin Spacey's character. The very, we have this thing where we want to go for at least to spend our moral disbelief. I actually wrote a blog about this like 4 or 5 how many years ago. We want to suspend our moral disbelief and actually kind of get excited for this to work out, whereas with Andor refuses to let you suspend any kind of moral disbelief. You have to commit to this real world conviction about good and evil and right and wrong and power and oppression. Plagueis, I think, is more fun in that way.
That's true. Andor is not Andor is not. I mean, he is a good guy. I mean, he is. I think by the end, it's like he's supposed to be unequivocally a good person. But he's also very much. He's not a Sith Lord. I guess I want to ask you, what's your relationship with this book, and I guess reading the plot synopsis for this review. Watching all those videos I sent you.
So full disclosure, I haven't read this since 2014, around there. So just kind of around the time of the Legends Canon changeover, before even I had really fully understood that changeover, or it had become that much common knowledge. Reading the Wikipedia article, shout out to our friends over at the Wook, doing the Force's work, helping me remember some of things, but some things I was surprised at how much I had actually recalled because of the way James Luceno was able to lay things out. And this is the point, Hannah, you say, is this going to be so connected with the saga? And as I'm sure you found out very quickly, it has all its claws right into the saga, all the way in.
The last third is just like the whole Phantom Menace.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'll get to that.
and so, I mean, I think, Joe, one of the questions you're getting at here is, and the reason I'm going to jump ahead, because this is intrinsic to my experience of reading this book, was what was my relationship with the book and with my relationship to the prequel trilogy. And here's the thing: I mentioned on this show, I've worn the hashtag prequelist T-shirt. I've been a prequelist since I think a little before it was cool. Before I read this book, I was still part of the whole peer pressure kind of group think about all the prequels, blah 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 blah. Not even gonna repeat that nonsense. I read this book and how it changed my perspective on it. Everything about this book just opened my eyes to what George Lucas was doing in that trilogy. This book, I think, is single-handedly responsible for my prequelist conversion, just showing everything from the Trade Federation to the everything with that Palpatine and Maul and his plans for the Force. Yeah, even the speech with Plagueis the Wise, even the birth of Anakin. I mean, I know that can be murky, but even what's happening on Naboo, what those massive vats are where Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are fighting, what's going on there, and how that connects to the wider galaxy and the taxation of outlying trade routes and
Dooku.
Valorum getting married in corruption and Dooku. And I mean, I could keep going, right? The Bunta Eve pod race, like, come on. It really, Luceno he did a mind meld with George Lucas and said, what were you thinking? What were you doing? And help me. And I'm going to help everyone fall in love with this second trilogy that you've done and really encounter it afresh and encounter it anew. And and I know I'm not alone in that. I know Clone Wars did a lot to that, but and people say, okay, that is not to the prequels credit. It should be apparent on the screen. We didn't deserve the prequels on its own. Is where I'll go with that. We needed help. We were the ones.
I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but
no, I'm saying we didn't. I'm saying it's not George's fault. We didn't appreciate his vision, and we needed people to spell it out. We needed James Luceno to spell it out, and to do it in such a convincing and well written and guided way, as I said, deliberate way. And this novel really shifted everything for me.
Yeah, well, let's get into that one bit, Hannah. Just basic question here. Skipping ahead of the book a little bit, we're not going to really go chronological. We're going to go all over the place. How'd you feel about Plagueis being alive during the Phantom Menace? Now you know during the Phantom Menace, like Plagueis, I'm over here,
Legends,
actually alive.
in
Legends. I'm Plagueis.
Yeah. That idea I actually really loved and I really enjoyed, and I kind of, as I was again, listening to it and hearing, they were in this Senate meeting and Plagueis was just like chilling up, watching it happen. I was like, oh my god, like we saw that. Like they could have just panned the camera and have Plagueis up there, which is really
what's going on over there?
I love that whole concept. So I wish that was canon, and I think it was really cool. They wrote it really well. It reminded me of how they created the season 7 of Clone Wars storyline to be in conjunction with Revenge of the Sith. It was the same kind of way they wrote that, the 10 years after, the piece of content was written, but they still interconnected it so well to the movie, and it all fit. I love that concept, and in my head, it's canon.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, especially because the last bit of the book is kind of around the time Qui-Gon and Maul die, and just around that time, Plagueis is killed by Palpatine. Kind of like when you're seeing that, like over there, by the time you get Palpatine's Chancellor, like he's already done it. Plagueis is dead. He's now the Sith master. Let me put here just to make sure. This book does a lot of recontextualizing of things, like even Darth Maul's kind of place in the Sith hierarchy.
Yes.
Of like, in I think, and I will say this is one of the things where I think in canon we're supposed to take it as what the movie is going, where he is the apprentice. But in Legends it's very like, no, Maul was technically he never was a Sith. He was an assassin that Palpatine said, "Oh yeah, you're a Sith, but you're not really part of the Rule of Two thing. But you don't know that Plagueis is alive, so we're not going to tell you."
Sounds like someone else on Dathomir.
Yeah, it's true. It's a Savage, but with Asajj Ventress.
Or even Ventress.
Yeah, Ventress. But if Ventress
True.
knew Sidious was actually no, Ventress didn't know Sidious was alive. So it'd be like if Maul knew Plagueis was alive, which I don't think he ever did. I think he has suspicions, but I don't think he ever
I don't think
went
he
on
ever
them.
finds that out. Yeah.
But like, how did you feel about kind of the recontextualization of Maul and kind of like he's not part of the true Rule of Two lineage, Hannah?
Oh yeah, that was super fascinating. And just that whole chapter where we go to Dathomir, and I go, oh, Dathomir, that's cool. That's cool that we go here in this book. Keep listening, keep listening. Woman hands a Zabarak baby. Oh, that's weird. Why would he get a baby? There's red and black markings. Oh my god! And just like this slow realization, being like, oh my god, we got the baby Maul in this book. Like what? That was to
Well,
be
you
honest.
can
That's
see
the
the back
wild
cover.
part of this book. Oh, he's on the back. See, okay,
Yeah.
that's I wouldn't. Maybe that's good
But-
that I didn't have the physical book because I.
Although
I
this
never
doesn't
knew he
actually
was
say
in it.
anything or tell you anything. It just
just
shows
has
that
it.
Maul's in it
Has it.
somehow. But
Okay.
fair enough. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so great.
I-
Yeah, good reveal.
Yeah, absolutely. Unbeknownst to me, he was going to be in it, so that was a fun little surprise. But yeah, it was very fascinating the way they wrote him in and kind of how he fit into the dynamic of Palpatine and Plagueis. How like Plagueis knew about it, but like he didn't really know too much about Maul, and obviously Maul not knowing about Plagueis. And having Maul was kind of like a test for Palpatine. Like it was really interesting the whole dynamic with all three of them. But again, like it makes sense. Like that all really makes sense, and I like how that was written a lot. Can't fault it.
Yeah, Matthew, I'll throw it to you. How do you feel about? I mean, obviously, you would like the recontextualization of the book gives in general, but how do you feel about just the kind of recontextualization of like watching Phantom Menace, at least in the concept of Legends, not maybe in canon. I personally think canon's not going with this idea, but in Legends and kind of this idea of like Palpatine's still technically the apprentice, and by the time Phantom Menace is over, Plagueis is dead. And obviously, Maul was never a true Sith in the kind of that Rule of Two way. He was more of an Asajj venture, kind of a thing.
I mean,
How do you feel about that?
Where my mind goes, hearing Hannah talk about it, what is still absolutely canon is Maul is just a pawn. He's strung along. Palpatine Sidious strings him along with the promise of power, but he's really a kid, and he dies a kid. He dies someone who isn't actually really able to transcend his rage and his ability to reason through circumstances. That confrontation, of course, with Obi-Wan and Tatooine twin sons. He's still stuck in his rage, and part of that, I mean, Sidious used that to keep him in check. Of course, harnessed him to be this assassin to go out. So yeah, I mean, this sort of, I don't want to say a lesser being because there are no, I can't suspend my moral disbelief about that, but someone who definitely Sidious always understood as just this, again, another temporary being, temporary fixture until Vader. I mean that this comes up in this book too a little bit, right? We will watch your career with great interest. And so that much doesn't get fully it just get fleshed out a little bit. Palpatine being the apprentice, it's actually still a little hard for me to wrap my mind around, because
I feel
even as the apprentice, he still shows so much mastery, and it's almost, it plays into the inflection that you were talking about with the speech, right? Is at the end, at least the Wikipedia article goes into this, or even, well, the scene where he kills Plagueis.
Did you watch that speech, by the way? Did you that video I sent you? Or
no, I haven't, but I mean, I remember the scene pretty clearly, right? And how Palpatine was the master for a while at this point. He was playing Plagueis, he was manipulating Plagueis into establishing the Clone Wars and creating this chaos with the Outer Rim and the taxation of trade routes and everything about the banking clan and the trade federation.
The banking clan.
So, I mean, he's the grand poobah of the banking clan, and
Yeah.
who what do we see Darth Sidious doing in the Clone Wars, manipulating, or even in Phantom Menace, manipulating the banking clan as being part of the Separatist alliance to cause the chaos of the Clone Wars to become emperor. So again, it's I don't feel like it's recontextualized as much. I will say it's just good to see until the point where Palpatine really starts to use Plagueis and really flip the script. He had to learn stuff from somewhere. He had to learn.
Right.
He had to be an apprentice. He had to come under Hago Damask's wing and Darth Plagueis' wing, and that much. But yeah, again, I wonder if recontextualization, frankly, is actually too far.
I don't know. I mean, I'll say for myself, it's not criticism I have of the book. It's just one of those things, that one of those wonky Star Wars timeline things. I mean, like the prequels themselves, like Vader's only 42 when he dies, 48. So like clearly he was a nice healthy 60. But like, everyone's now younger. True. Yeah, whatever. It's one of those weird things.
That's a good way of putting it. Wonky can be, but
wonky timeline thing. Where it's like, really, Plagueis was alive and died. Like that story that Palpatine tells Anakin, it only happened after the Phantom Menace. I was like 15 years ago. I mean, the interesting thing about that story and that whole Plagueis scene, where is sort of interesting, is I think in its own context, it's interesting because it could be, I think we are supposed to imply Palpatine talking about himself, but we don't know that. He could easily be talking about just, here's this story about an apprentice who killed the master. Happens hundreds of times, and he was a very powerful master. Or even if you want to think about it as him, kind of, this is something that happened to Palpatine decades and decades when he was still had orange hair. Always found Palpatine, Palpatine had orange hair. So that's what his natural hair color before he went gray. And not just. This actually happened like when you were like 10, and then just like 15 years ago. This old story and happened around the time Qui-Gon died. It's not a criticism. It's not even like a recontextualization. It's just kind of one of those. Oh wow, you pushed the story of Plagueis really close before the saga starts. Plagueis was still there the whole time.
I'll say two things about that. Is again, it underscores just how masterful Sidious is at this point. Even at the point in the Phantom Menace of his master is still alive, and yet he's stringing him along for as long as he needs him to become Chancellor. And so they're flipping the script. Also, a very critical layer of the opera scene speech is the suggestion that James Luceno explores that Anakin's birth is tied into Plagueis' ability to manipulate midi-chlorians somehow. So Anakin's own identity and destiny somehow, I mean, it's not true. It's a fabrication that,
unless you
just
read
like
the
everything
scenes of George's script.
Right. But I mean, with what the Plagueis novel goes into is it's not true. It's the Force actually roaring back and saying no to what the Sith are doing. But that meant that suggestion then does also potentially move the timeline closer to Anakin's birth. Of course, it's 9 years after Anakin's birth, but it ties it in more. And it's one of those claws that is dug right into the whole saga. And because, of course, Anakin's birth is then Luke and Leia's birth is Ben Solo's birth. So.
All right. Well, in Legends, it would have been Jane and Jason.
Sure, but you know what I mean.
Jason.
Yeah. I mean, I guess let's get into it. We have our notes. Hannah.
Yes.
Going into this book, what did you think about Plagueis? Like, what did you have envisioned in your own head who this character was? And as you read the book, kind of, what did you think of him coming out of the book? Kind of, where were your thoughts when you started, and where did your thoughts where you ended? Like, what did you think Plagueis?
Yeah.
Who do you think Plagueis was?
It's really interesting because I really hadn't kind of read much about him, or all I kind of knew was when people would mention him. So I think my expectation of what he was pretty close to what he actually was. Just this obscure kind of what's the word? Kind of hermit. Just malevolently evil. Like I feel like my expectation and just theory of what he was, he is that, and I think I enjoyed how he was like at definitely earlier in the book. He was a lot more like active and involved, and like with his dark side powers. Actually, there was that whole thing where he like got on the ship, the freighting
Oh
ship.
yeah,
and
those
guys
guys.
killed the whole crew, and
Yeah,
like I was like not happy. It's an odd word to choose
Excited.
there, but
It's fun.
I was interested to see, them showing like they're not just politically evil, like they just like he just killed like a whole bunch of people and like didn't care about it and was like, all right, let's move on. So I think my expectation of him was like pretty close to what he was. He was just a lot more active than I thought he was.
Yeah. It's interesting, Darth Tenebris, who was Plagueis' master. Fun fact, Darth Tenebris is Abyss. If you know who an Abyss is, those are the guys that go in the Tatooine band. So yeah, one of those with the Sith Lord, Ultimate Evil, that trade the Ultimate Evil.
Ultimate Evil.
But I think it's interesting, you mentioned political evil. He said in the book, Tenebris mentioned something about how in the old days, Sith wore armor, and now we wear cloaks and we're invisible.
Yes, that was a great line. I remember that actually. Yeah.
And, Plagueis and Palpatine are very much the epitome of what the Bane Sith have become since those days, of the ancient time when, Sith were just armored, wearing, maybe sometimes withered fleet controlling people. Now they are bankers, politicians, computer scientists. Damas Holdings, yes, owners of mega corporations. In part of the elite, and I think that's really interesting. But I think, what did you make of Plagueis also being kind of, I call it a kind of a mad scientist Frankenstein monster with like manipulating midichlorians and just experimenting constantly with animals, and this one guy called Venomous.
Venomous, that guy.
So like constantly resurrecting and killing him with the midichlorians.
Right? Right. Yeah, I found that such a cool like just incorporation of his into that of his character. And I think I found reading and hearing all that. I never know what I listen to it. Hearing that or read, I don't know. Whatever. Same thing.
Yeah, reading. It's fine.
But how similar it is to the story we have kind of going on with the cloning experiments of what's happening in Mount Taintus and the Kaminoans, and even in Bad Batch, and what's going to happen in Mando. Like there's this idea of there's people out there exploring, cloning, midichlorian cloning, and all those kinds of things. So that really struck me, and I think obviously it's funny because obviously the Mando Bad Batch cloning thing is something, and Rise of Skywalker is something that I knew before coming into this. So hearing all this, I was like, oh, this is like what we got now. Like that's like kind of what he was doing. But yeah, I think it was a good like facet to his character, and I found it really interesting nearing like after the middle of the book, where he went into. It was after his attack. He got attacked, and he like went into hiding for like 10 years or some amount of time. Just like what planet was that? What was his lab on? What
Sojourn.
Lab on?
Sojourn.
Yeah. Where he just like hid there and did that for years, and like Palpatine didn't even see him for a while. And I was like, that's so fascinating. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I gotta ask, how do you feel about that scene where he was talking to Jabba and Jabba speaking English?
Wow, I didn't even twig that was not correct. Oh my gosh. You know what? That's fine. That's fine. He can know a bit of English.
I'm sure he actually does, right? just won't deign to speak English if he can, be
Right.
the daimyo and
Power
be
move.
power move, exactly. There we go.
Yeah. I
No,
was
go ahead,
just
Joe.
gonna say, I always find it interesting. Legends kind of went with the idea that all the Sith kind of became elites and politicians or big name people. Um, I'm kind of curious. I mean, we can always talk about this another day. But like, if Canon will go that way, or maybe Canon will make Plagueis more of a mystical shaman. Remember that image I showed you, Matthew, of Nemoidian Plagueis from early
Yeah,
concepts?
that
Like, I'm
is
kind of
neat.
curious if they'll go maybe like he was a shaman and Palpatine was the first one to like, I'm going to try and enter politics for the first time. I mean, I don't know. But Matthew,
Yeah.
what were always your thoughts on Plagueis as a character before reading the book? And I guess, looking at the Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts on him kind of moving out of it? Like, what were your general impressions of the Wise?
Yeah. So, I mean, 2014, I mean, all we had, of course, was what was the opera scene speech, right? And so I'll say, sorry, the whole mad scientist part, that makes sense. He's manipulating midichlorians to create life, at least according to Darth Sidious there in the opera scene. But the way Luceno carries through the Hago Namask part of it, it makes perfect sense that with him being supporting Palpatine's rise, and of course everything to do with Sand Hill and the Bacon Clan, and being the mentor of Sand Hill's father, and and everything with Mune and Munalist, and these sort of, I mean, I remember the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, how they're these nasally sniveling, I mean, caricature of New York Wall Street elites, right? Of saying where the money, the money power behind the political power. And I will say one thing I very strikingly remember reading this book the first time is when he does go on the ship. So everything we see, he kills Tenebris and he escapes, and we know he's Plagueis and all that. Goes on the ship, and suddenly some Hago Namask shows up. Who's Hago Namask? What's happening here? It took me a second to connect that the droid is actually referring to him. And what's so wonderful, what's so amazing about this book is the way it depicts, like you said, the cloak, the face, the mask, to the point where I used to have this whole hobby horse of saying I'm refusing to call him Palpatine. Might have been even earlier in this podcast, like a year ago, refusing to call him Palpatine, refusing to call him call him Hago Namask or whatever. He's Darth Sidious, that's his real name. And and the way the mask is just the tool, it's just the means by which the Sith can come to control life, control the Force. We can get into the philosophy in a bit, but I will say though, I mean the mad scientist, the playing God dimension of him, and again trying to be immortal and violate the limits of nature. That is such a fascinating and wonderful, in the sense of very clear definition of evil, of trying to transcend the limits that nature or God or the Force or whoever has put on us all, so that we actually have to cooperate and work together and live together and support each other. And I do love that the birth of, if you want to say the birth of the chosen one, is the Force again saying, heck no, you're not allowed to manipulate life this way. I'm going to I'm gonna push back and bring about this kid who, I mean, of course, does become Darth Vader. But the whole, I mean, the two sides of it, the two sides of the coin, that then again helps me really understand Darth Sidious so well in both ways. I mean, I know again we're going to get to Palpatine's rise of power, but the start of his beginning, how he has to kill his family. There is, and this is again the origins for me of this idea of to truly be a Sith. Sorry, you have to commit an atrocity. You have to do something completely unconscionable, completely beyond the pale. We see Anakin do it in Order 66 in going into the council chamber, right? Master Skywalker, they're everywhere. welcome to the dark side.
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, that we want to talk about recontextualization, about finding a new light, providing the meaning of it, saying what we see in Kenobi, and of course in the Kieran Gillen comic of Vader killing Anakin, you know, Sheev Palpatine killing any sort of potential good. You know, that he learned to, of course, do that from Plagueis, who, I mean, that isn't the first time he's gone into a ship and killed everybody, but yeah, the what I'm getting at here is the connection between the physical evil and the political evil that this book really teases out and pushes forward. The complete disregard for life, and to say my life is inherently more valuable than everyone else's, and it really plays into the character, because the bravado and the arrogance of it. I mean, of course, that is, you know, Luke tells Darth Sidious that that's going to be his downfall, and of course Sidious doesn't deny that. But it says, yeah, I'm arrogant. I'm more valuable than everyone else.
It's kind of interesting you brought that up. Actually, good transition, because Palpatine, you know, the thing about Plagueis in both the beginning of the book and the end of the book, where Plagueis killed his master and Palpatine killed Plagueis, is both Tenebrous and Palpatine accuse Plagueis of, you're overconfident. Like, you know, Plagueis killed his master, but he destroys the ship along with it. So he's like, dude, you ruined the whole Sith thing. There's only two of us here. If we both die, then what happens?
Yeah.
And then Palpatine, you know, he's killing his, you know, doing his thing. You know, he's like, you know, he said something about like that, like, you were so confident that, you know, you built a world, but you forgot to leave a place for yourself, because you thought, you know, I wasn't going to do this. You thought, oh, we were going to, you know, Plagueis was all so confident, like, oh no, the rule of two's over. We're going to be equals, you know. But he was so wrapped up in his own overconfidence, like, you know, no, Plagueis was never, you know, Palpatine was never going to let that happen. Beyond, you know, Palpatine was like, you know, you thought we were going to rule together side by side, but it's like, no, you just wanted to be under your thumb the whole time. And, you know, he goes on to this whole, really listen to that speech at the end where Palpatine kills Plagueis. It's so good. It's so good, you know, like Plagueis, who, you know, the arrogant, who choked his own apprentice to kind of teach him a lesson and stuff like that. You know, he's like, Palpatine by the end is like, you know, teacher, yes, and forever I will be grateful, but master, never, you know. That final speech is really good. But it's sort of interesting that Palpatine, you know, Mr. Your overconfidence is your weakness, Palpatine accuses Plagueis of overconfidence. And in some way, Plagueis was overconfident, thinking, you know, he would be the ethereal commander of the world, while Palpatine would handle, you know, the living realm.
Like Palpatine would be the mask for Plagueis.
Damask. He would be Damask.
Dumb. You know, Palpatine, Plagueis would control the cosmic force, and Palpatine the living force. And I think that's something really interesting about Plagueis's character, and the kind of odd, I don't think altruism is the right word, but there is sort of an interesting, I mean, this book I think really shows what a nuanced Sith can be like in probably the best way possible, how much of a nuanced Sith you can get out of the Sith, where Plagueis, I mean, you're right, Plagueis is like, I'm a higher being, but I think he kind of sees that as sort of like, I'm smart, the galaxy's in trouble, only I, this high intellectual being, should rule, and thus the galaxy will be better. Kind of how I see Thrawn in a lot of ways, where it's like, you know, we're smarter beings, therefore we should rule over the lesser ones because they don't know what to do.
Or Mace Windu, or, you know.
Even a little bit of Mace Windu, too, to a certain extent. Even, like, Mace Windu, at least, you know, I think could be held back. This is what Mace Windu at the dark side would be like, probably. But, like, you know, Plagueis is very much, I'm a higher being with these powers. But I also think that, he's not a complete psychotic, while as Palpatine is just a complete psychotic. Like, no, I'm just doing this because I like torturing people and I'm just going to have fun. Like, I'm evil and I like it. Well, Plagueis is a bit more, he'll kill you if he has to, but he's not going to just start randomly just go like, dead, I'm bored, dead. You know, it's going to be there's a little bit more altruism for that. Oh, Kareem says, well, the Plagueis real name being Damask is a little on the nose.
It's
Even if he doesn't have
so
I
delightfully George Lucas.
love
what
it.
that
I don't
is.
know. I wonder if that's from George Lucas though, or not. I don't know what's from
No,
Lucas
but
and what's
it's
from Luceno.
George Lucas-esque, right? That
Yes,
kind of
same,
very
yeah.
obvious,
Oh,
like
so
Darth
good.
Sidious.
Well, they are in this book, so we're going to go
Yeah.
over this in a bit.
Coming off the back of what you were just saying, Joel, I really agree. I love how they do this thing with the Sith that
Mhm.
like their biggest like kind of strength or what they strive for is their downfall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, again with the Plagueis, the whole thing of just like that's what he was striving for, to be this like everlasting immortal being, but you know his focus on that really made his weakness for Palpatine to gain more understanding, control, and perspective, and for many years planned to overthrow him. And Plagueis, I feel like before he got really into that big hole of like figuring out how to be immortal, probably would have felt it or known or just could tell. But I feel like by the end, Plagueis was just so in that, just narrow-minded in that he couldn't see that what Palpatine was doing. I love that whole concept.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like, you know, when he killed Tenebris at the beginning of the book, like, is it like, you know, hey, I'm the Bay line ends with you. I will now rule for 1,000 years, and the Sith, we're gonna all be happy-go-lucky Sith. And it's sort of interesting that the Sith kind of always revert back to that kind of rule of two mentality which Bane established. And the rule of two is just is a fascinating contradiction of itself, where, you know, Sith are all about, you know, getting power. Like, you know, we're all Sith lords here, you know, like, and then I kill Matthew because he's master and I'm apprentice and kill him, you know, like, but then at the same time you're like, you did good, kid, you killed me, good, keep on the line. And then, you know, I take Hannah as my apprentice, and eventually Hannah's gotta kill me, and I'm gonna be like, but then you're like, good kid, you killed me, keep that line going.
That's
You
just
know,
how it rolls. That's how it goes.
With that inflection too, I should say.
I know, and it's just sort of, and it's, you know, the Sith are. It's sort of weird that the Sith have this big, long-term goal with the grand plan. They're always talking about the grand plan, the Sith grand plan, started by Bane, to just chip away at the Republic for as long as it takes, and then finally, Plagueis is like, "Okay, Republic's good. Time to finally go to the final quarter, people. We're gonna go start the Clone Wars and we're gonna do it. We're gonna create an empire. Finally our time." But then always kind of getting wrapped up in their own little weird vanity projects along the way, and it's just kind of always setting them back. So it's like there's just odd contradictions of like the Sith have this, like Palpatine even Ren's Sith, like, you know, he's so happy. He loves the idea of like, yes, Vader's gonna be so more powerful than either of us, Yoda. It's gonna be great. The dark side's gonna really get. But at the same time, Palpatine's like, you know, I'm also the immortal god, and I don't want to. I have all these clones ready to go for myself. You know, you know, that kind of a situation. So, you know, it's kind of these weird contradictions. I love how the book goes into that. Like, Plagueis thinking that the rule of two line will end. Palpatine's like, nah, that's not how this works. The master's got to kill the apprentice to seek dominance. And obviously, Palpatine's kind of, Palpatine in a weird way, kind of had kind of cruddy apprentices. You know, Maul in either version was never really meant a good Sith Lord. Dooku was too old and probably never would have. I mean, maybe Dooku came close to kind of that, the Plagueis Sidious sissiness. Vader, I just don't see Anakin ever like studying Sith relics and stuff like that, like doing the Sith
not being serious enough for it.
Yeah, he's not serious enough for it. Like, and you know, that's why Palpatine kind of has the rule of 1.5, where it's like he's on the top, and it's like when an apprentice is crud, well, next one, just the next one, but I'm still on top. While Plagueis, I think, tried to create a real Sith in Palpatine, but thought he would be an equal, and then obviously, like, oh nope, that he created the worst monster ever. So
yeah,
those contradictions are just fascinating in that book.
I mean, you want to talk about the through lines throughout the whole saga that this book has. Just like Plagueis couldn't tell that Palpatine, that Sidious was really manipulating him the whole way, and really just like I was saying before about the Clone Wars and about the chaos in the Outer Rim. And I mean, we have in canon, we even see in Rise of Skywalker, abilities some consider unnatural, the cloning kind of that you mentioned, and probably something to do with manipulating midi-chlorians, although I don't think the Rise of Skywalker novelization has gone into that too much either. I
They mentioned
would love it
Plagueis
if
a
they
lot
did.
in that book, though. So
Interesting. Yeah, I would have loved it if it goes into midi-chlorians a little more. But
I'll say this. I'll say this.
okay.
In the novelization where Palpatine talking to Rey, he's like, "With your hatred, you will take my life, and you will ascend."
Yeah.
In the novelization, Palpatine goes, "With your hatred, you will take my life, and you will ascend, as I did when I lost Plagueis."
Yes.
Plagueis gets the main job.
Yeah. And so there's a through line even through Disney canon right there. But what I was getting at is just the same way. The problem with the rule of two is if one of them comes back to the light side, then is a whole other motivation to kill the master or something. I mean,
That
it's
actually
violent.
happens, and that's actually mentioned in the book.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, there's Darth Millennial, whatever that guy's name, but
Darth
I'm
Gravis.
talking about Anakin Skywalker here,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
it's 40 years of Return of the Jedi. I'm saying just as Plagueis couldn't tell that Sidious was manipulating him, Sidious could kind of tell, but didn't want to believe that Vader could come back to the light. Didn't want to believe that this boy, Luke would be enough of a pull to because for I mean this novel goes into family attachments mean nothing to him. Family attachments were the things that held him back with his father, and therefore having to do the atrocity as the psychopath to join the Sith. Forgetting that with Vader, with Anakin, it's family attachments that got him there in the first place with Padme. And I've said this multiple times, the most beautiful poetic moment of one of the most poetic moments of the whole saga, of course. But Return of the Jedi, seeing the son of Padme writhing on the floor like that. I mean, in that mind, he's going to take this second chance to come back. And so, yeah, it's that. I mean, it's almost to say, could Bane have even anticipated, and this is something maybe Drew Karpyshyn went to, I don't know, but could Bane have even anticipated what would happen if one of them does return back to the light and turns them in, the whole plan is over, which, I mean, explains why you have to repeatedly traumatize your apprentice and completely enslave them to vengeance and hatred through this torture.
It's kind of amazing they just... I'm going to say, kind of amazing the Sith didn't self-destruct earlier. It's like, they're hanging on a knife here. I mean, the book does go into the idea of, I think, Darth Grava, who, he was a Sith master, who tried to introduce light side techniques to the Force, went crazy, destroyed a bunch of Sith artifacts, set the Siths back hundreds of years, but his apprentice killed him and had to continue on. So it's like, I'm surprised the Sith haven't had more problems than what they normally... that line lasted for 1,000 years as much as it did before, eventually, Vader's did the thing. But yeah, I guess we can move on to Palpatine, who's kind of the secondary, if not the main character, quite frankly. It's he's certainly the point of view character through a good chunk of the book. It's kind of it's kind of... it's not Palpatine's origin. There's no real origin. I mean, it is an origin to a certain extent, but it's it is. It's Plagueis through Palpatine's eyes, at least when it's introduced. I mean, we start with Plagueis and then we get to Palpatine. But I guess, Hannah, what were your thoughts of seeing college boy Palpatine, college playboy, hot on campus Palpatine with that orange hair? Kind of just being a little loner, doing weird dark side gothy kid stuff.
Yeah, it was really fun, actually. And it's something that I think I've always been curious about. So I really enjoyed the amount of his life that was in this book. Because I always, how did he he's so evil when we know him. How did he present as a teenager? How was he as a kid? We didn't really see him as a kid, but as a young adult, how was he then? And I think his character makes so much sense, and I think it's really that when they have the whole sequence where he kills his whole family, it's okay, wow, all right, this guy is evil, but I think they characterized him so well, and his storyline and arc is just fantastic, and even when they start to get into a little bit when he is older and an adult, of just his control that he has of his political control, how much people trust him and see him as this charismatic guy, and he's such a he's never had any problems, no one's ever complained about Palpatine, and I find that also fascinating. So yeah, I really loved how they characterized him all throughout this.
Yeah, I mean, he's exactly what you think he'd be. He's a little Omen kid. One who's he's a little kind of a little just a psycho kid. It's like he's probably pulling the wings up the flies and doing weird stuff. But and even and I like how in the book, Plagueis, like when he sees him, he's like, this kid's like a dark side nexus, like a hole in the force that just sucks everything good. It's like even he knows this kid is like like it's sort of like there's even it's a fan theory that's never been truly gone into, but it's something interesting to think about. Like Palpatine is like the anti-Anakin, like he himself was born of the dark side. Although he was tested, so he was above the blood. But it's like the dark side kind of burst him to like, hey, be our champion in a weird way. Let's have all this like just to being a pure evil.
Yeah. I mean, Rise of Skywalker kind of goes there. I mean, if Rey is all the Jedi, I'm all the Sith.
A little bit of that, certainly. Yeah. But there's that. And Plagueis being Dr. Frankenstein, he makes the Frankenstein monster. And it's from the book, not the movie. If you actually know the book actually has the monster is actually quite intelligent and actually 10 times worse than the movie version. Yeah. So fun fact there. But Matthew, we've talked about Palpatine, his origins. I told you once about that story about he was gonna have a love interest, and then that kind of turned into the dark side from the Underworld show back in the day. That never got anywhere. Kind of just what were your thoughts reading? I mean, whatever you remember from the book and what you read from just the excerpt of Palpatine's origins here, or as origin as we should get for him.
Yeah, I mean, so we make a lot of how brooding, evil, violent he is. I mean, we're starting to see more in canon, at least the public figure, the image. And we saw that in Rebels with the genteel grandpa, Uncle Palps. This is that all we all see the origin of that is here too. I mean, like you said, everyone loves him, everyone trusts him, in more than everyone trusts Hago Damask. Although, in a very meritorious capitalist society where billionaires exist, like ours, people trust people because they have money, which is thankfully changing quite a bit. I just saw a great tweet by Heather Antos laughing at someone who thought billionaires got all their money because they had the drive to do crazy things, do special things, and Force Plus Heather Antos for seeing that as ridiculous. But yeah, so people trust Hago Damask. They really trust Palpatine. He is going to take an industrial strength wrench and clean up for the corruption of the galaxy, including, I mean, we see this in the Phantom Menace, right? We see just how warm and kind he is to Padme. What I really, just thinking back and reading back about this, that was another part of this that's interesting. We forget that he is the senator from Naboo. He is intrinsically connected to Naboo politics, and playing that angle as part of the orchestrating the origins of the Clone Wars, and the manipulating King Varuna into lobbying for taxation of outlying trade routes, and saying, I'm going to take care of my people, as in take care of the people of Naboo, representing them in Coruscant. And that being the mask, that being so much part of the plan to win over the hearts and minds of people in order to take over the galaxy and oppress everyone. But it's interesting. The thing about psychopaths, right? They can flip the switch, and they can be incredibly charming, and they can flick another switch and be incredibly violent, and they don't have any sort of moral belief at all, and it's complicated in the real world. There's things to do with brain waves and brain patterns, and I don't fully know the philosophy and morality of it, frankly, but to see it on paper to see it, to flesh it out, because the films only imply all this, right? Especially when he does flick the switch on Count Dooku, it is the grotesque that we see. I'm happy, not happy. I enjoy, again, the House of Cards parallel, right? Seeing both faces of the manipulative leader. Everyone loves what was President Underhill. Everyone, America works.
Underwood.
Yeah, America works. He's the Democrat. He's the somewhat moderate Democrat, but somewhat progressive. Gonna actually get people back to work. Gonna reform infrastructure. All of it's a front just to have more power and just to be able to manipulate everything and everyone. So, again, really well written, really convincing layers again to what we see in Phantom Menace and throughout the prequel trilogy, reverberating into the sequel trilogy even, and of course the original. But it makes him far more interesting, and that's another thing is evil characters. It's hard for me to make them interesting or hard for them to make them interesting to me because they can often be mustache twirling. I definitely think Markian Rowe and Great Grandma Marta are very, very interesting, but it's difficult because you actually have to not necessarily sympathize or empathize, but at least understand, and an author has to do the work of thinking through what this character's motivations are, suspending their own moral disbelief a little bit to present a plausible character, a plausible picture, and James Luceno does that brilliantly.
It's interesting. I forgot you mentioned, he is from Naboo, and Plagueis even mentioned, how something so dark could come from a planet so beautiful like Naboo. And there's actually one scene which I really like. It's like near the end where Palpatine goes to visit Padme's parents. Padme doesn't get a lot of this book. That's another thing that would be sad.
Yeah.
She kind of gets mentioned, like she's the governor of Fleet at the time. She's only 12. Governor, 12 years old. Ain't that something? I mean, I guess Naboo is sort of organized as a very politically active. Everyone kind of has to join a political service, at least a little bit. But it's sort of funny just kind of seeing Padme's parents from the deleted scenes of Attack the Clones. At that one scene, the Revenge of the Sith. And they're like, hey, Palpatine, our buddy. And then, they hug. They're like, hey, how's it going, old chum of buddy of mine? It's like, Palpatine would suggest, hey, maybe you should have your daughter run for queen of the planet. I think that's a good idea, says Palpatine. Then, obviously that's leading into Phantom Menace.
Padme, I mean, that's another thing. Padme continually outwits Palpatine. Continually. Even again, until, of course, the end when her son is the reason that Vader comes back. But yeah, I mean, another shortcoming, and I know it's fun to kind of harp on the bad guy, but that's another wrinkle in a layer, is that he isn't all powerful. He just thinks he is. He isn't all in control. He just thinks he is, and that's more interesting. That's more convincing that this 12, 14-year-old girl can genuinely surprise him by going back to Naboo, into the danger and into the occupation. And
well, he got what he wanted. He still became Chancellor, so
sure, but it's a wrinkle. It's a start of what we end up seeing in Return of the Jedi and in Rise of Skywalker.
That's true. I honestly don't think about the sequel trilogy too much with this book, because I know they didn't think about it at the time. So.
Fair enough, but
it didn't exist. But no, I think Palpatine's an interesting part of this as well. But I guess to get to my next section, we talked about this earlier, but this book really shows us what it's like to be a Sith in a lot of ways. Bane does this a little bit too.
A day in the life.
I mean, like, what is it like to be
Get ready with me,
new Sith? And I guess, Hannah, what were your take on just seeing what's it like to be a Sith Lord? The day in the life of a Sith Lord, like just seeing the machinations of just the kind of the two of them doing their thing, Sithing.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I could ever be a Sith, purely because everything takes so long. You've got to wait like years for like your plan to work. It's not just like, oh yeah, we'll just do this next week. It's like in 5 years we'll do this. We'll go here and do this thing. It's like, oh geez, everything takes so long.
No wonder
1,000
Anakin finally
years to
couldn't cut
destroy
it.
the Jedi. Worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's honestly my only reason. That's the only reason I wouldn't join the Sith.
Come on.
But no, yeah, it was really fascinating to see how they worked, and everything really does take a really long time, and it's very well thought out plans. But I guess that's why Palpatine did get to a point where he ruled the galaxy for like 30
years.
30
years.
30-ish years. Yeah,
By the time he's chancellor, yes.
Not rightfully so, but like, I don't know, the guy kind of thought it out. Like, it was a good plan.
He did the work.
Yeah, he put the work in, and it
E for
showed.
effort.
It showed.
E for effort, E for emperor.
Right? But yeah, it was such a good.
Mhm.
You know, I'm a big fan of the Jedi. I love all the Jedi stories, and it was just really interesting getting the other side of that, and what are the Sith up to? What are they doing? The Jedi have no idea at this point in time.
Right.
You know, and we get to get that kind of eye into it. So
Mhm.
I it was kind of refreshing for me to just get such a Sith centered story.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Also, I find it funny. It's like you'd think the Sith would be terrible at patience too, but like, nah. They're like, our grand plan will have to take 1,000 years. We're probably not. We won't live to see it, but our great Sith
more.
We'll
Yeah.
deal with it.
Just
Patient. And then obviously in the book itself was like, okay, we're gonna place this guy here, and in 30 years he's gonna get promotion to this, and then once he's ready, we're gonna then do this. I've already made contact with the Kaminoans. We'll be ready for that when the time comes.
I mean, I wonder if that's a bit of an attrition thing, in that if there's a Sith that's gonna be so fools rush in about it, then the master is gonna find a weakness much more quickly and open it up and strike and say, no, you're not good enough. We need someone who's more patient. So thought. I mean, it's interesting how Vader. I mean, I think Vader, if Vader hadn't been burned up on Mustafar, probably would have been that way. Maybe mean powerful, but there would have been a heck of a job reining the kid in. And I mean, that's partly why Maul was never able, going back to what we were saying before, never able to fully be an actual Sith apprentice and had no chance of being a master. Way too impatient.
I mean, even Palpatine talks about how in the when he's killing Plagueis, he's like, hey, I had 2 times to kill you, but I knew the first time I couldn't do it because I needed to learn more. I got to learn more. Second time, I could have killed you then, but I'm glad you lived because, like, nah, I still think I got more to learn. I got more to learn, and I do think that is sort of that is the contradiction of the rule too, but also kind of, as you say, the attrition part of. The apprentice, like, am I strong? Am I truly a strong apprentice? But at the same time, it's like, what if he didn't tell me something? What if he had a secret thing that I need to know about?
Insecurity.
Especially he hadn't cracked the code yet. I mean, that's an interesting thing, is Sidious kills him before he's fully actually figured out the whole midi-chlorian thing. I guess it was good enough that he's chancellor.
He was pretty damn close, though. Like, he was cutting it fine.
He was getting there. And again, Joel, I mean, I'm sorry, I know you don't think about it, but I can't help it now. Rise of Skywalker. I mean, what if, I don't know if J.J. Abrams has heard of this book, but Chris Terrio must have.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And so, wonder if at least something going on there in terms of taking out or just picking up on, maybe, I mean, we got the opera scene there, but it provides enough of the whole sense of wanting immortality, but the theme of it really does this huge to the conviction that Palpatine has in Rise of Skywalker to really be immortal, to the point where he's okay being a clone suspended from this machine, and he's okay with having Rey strike him down to inhabit her body. Just stopping at nothing, that feels more like Plagueis than it does a younger Palpatine.
I mean, to be fair, this book takes a lot from the book we talked about last week, Dark Empire.
Yeah.
This is sort of very much the clone. I mean, that whole book's about Palpatine back, and he's got this essence transfer in these clone bodies. It's the imperfect method of how to be immortal, but
maybe Chris Terrio's thinking of that book too. I don't know.
Well, I know the novelization talks about, like, in the novelization when we're getting to see Palpatine's thoughts on, what happened after Endor, he's like, the transfer was incomplete. Maybe Plagueis did have the last laugh, and that secret was truly lost forever.
Yeah.
So this is as good as it's going to get for Palpatine right now.
Yeah.
In terms of being immortal. It's interesting, there's a lot of the book, like, about Plagueis trying to talk about, like, what the difference between a Jedi and a Sith are.
Yes.
Obviously, everything was a grain of salt with him. Like, here's a good quote. Remember why the Sith are more powerful than the Jedi, Sidious, but we are not afraid to feel. There's also another good one where it's like, that's the same one. You talk about, like, the power of the dark side is an illness no true Sith would wish to be cured of. Where the Jedi counterpower, the Sith lusted after it. Where the Jedi believed they knew the truth, the Sith possessed it, owned by the dark side. They ultimately became their knowledge. And it's interesting. I've been thinking about this as I've been listening to parts of the book. Plagueis is kind of the anti-Qui-Gon, in that he also kind of has more of a twisted view of serving the Force. He goes on about why the Jedi have lost their way in, like, the Jedi have decided to make the business of the Republic the business of the Force. And he says something along the lines of, like, when has a political body ever been the arbiter of what is right and just? He says, like, if the Jedi had perhaps gone so out of their way to not be part of the Republic and really listen to the Force with their rituals, or maybe even gone further to the other extreme of, like, Jedi chancellors and stuff like that, they would have not been in this weird position they are in now. And I think that is really fascinating. Hannah, what did you also make of, like, just a lot of any particular quotes from Plagueis or his philosophies on the dark side and the Sith that stood out to you throughout the book?
That is a great question.
Hannah's theology time.
Yeah. Oh, we're getting there. Don't worry, we're getting there. I have my hand on the button. You go for it.
Like, nothing really comes to mind, really, but it's really hard because I've coming into this book, I really had such, like, bare bones knowledge of even just how the Sith worked and, like, what they were up to and what they would be doing. So just his whole going about what he thought the purpose of the Sith was really interesting. And actually, what he would keep repeating this thing of, I forget how it goes, but he's how it's either you have the dark side of the Force, but it inhabits you, or vice versa. You inhabit it. He has this really interesting. Man, I got to read it again, and clearly, he has this kind of perspective that you don't kind of wait for the Force to kind of come to you and be, reside in you. You have to aggressively go after it and kind of take it for your own, which is an interesting perspective. Contrasting to the Jedi of, it's this living thing. You let it flow through you. You let it dictate what you do. Plagueis was very much like, you take it for your own. You own the dark side.
Yeah, he talked about, like, how the Sith want to take the Force, break it, bind it, control its will. It's turning into a very our ratings going up, people. A very, very wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? He wants to do things to the Force. Just want to do things to the Force.
Wow.
And
how do you say? Sorry, go ahead. You're good.
No. It's like, it's like they want to just, like the path of the open hands. It's like, the Force shouldn't be called by everyone. Like, this is like, no, we take the Force and, like, you're gonna do what I say. We're gonna take that Force. Do what we say, Force.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say break it, bind it. One ring to rule them all.
Bend it to your will.
To encapsulate all power in the galaxy in your hand. And okay, here we go. There we go. I mean, this book really is the start of really introducing this brilliantly fascinating reflection again on what evil is and what we're all motivated to and driven to in our fear, in our the scarcity, in the quest for survival. And in the quest for survival, we're driven either to hunker down and defend, or to reach out and to collaborate and work together. And it all comes down to well, first of all, there is, I mean, this I should stop and say there is this interesting tension, especially interesting by Darth Momin introduces in canon about, and I think we're getting this, do you control the dark side? Do you control the Force, or do you become the servant of the dark side, the slave to the dark side, by seeking more power, by seeking more control? And Momin is a great example of someone motivated, impelled to wreak more havoc and wreak more evil. I don't know if Plagueis goes in that direction. I think he's a little simpler than that, and Palpatine Sidious is a little simpler in that.
Can I read a quote from you? Maybe that will help. I have a quote.
Yeah, if you find the quote, go for it.
I have it right here.
If we're on the same page, go for it.
Yeah, I think so. He goes, "Evil, what is that?" This is Plagueis talking. "You said you were death itself. Are you evil then, or are you simply stronger and more awake than others? Who gives more shape to sentient history, the good who adhere to the tried and true, or those who seek to rouse from their stupor and lead them to glory? A storm you are, but a much-needed one to wash away the old and complacent and prune the galaxy of dead weight."
So, yeah, and what I'm getting at there is what is mastery, and what is mastery over death. And yeah, it really is this. What I mean, to bring it up, the fact that history between the contrast between Plagueis and Qui-Gon, and how for Plagueis it is all about trying to control life itself, trying to control the Force itself, because the Force bends towards life. The Force is for the sake of the flourishing of life, and so if you can control it, you can cause life and death to serve your own will, to serve your own interests. That ultimately just causes death, because our own perspectives, our own moral compulsions are never fully pure, never fully just. We will always cause destruction. My good, at some point, can come at your expense, and at least in my own limited imagination of what I think my good is. On the other hand, Qui-Gon Jinn is the ultimate of, no, the living Force, is the source of life, and we are to submit to the living Force. We are to listen to its ebbs and flows and its nudges and clear directions. And when I'm gonna go before the Jedi Council, because if they are using, like Plagueis says, considering that the good of the Republic is the good of the Force, I'm going to say no. It's always, the Force is always beyond and always above, and we have to be free to listen to the ways of the Force and listen to what it's calling us and where it's calling us to go, including to Tatooine, to this kid who, maybe this virgin, maybe who knows what, clearly has this extreme generosity and goodness in him. Qui-Gon doesn't know the future, but at the very least, he's listening in the moment, in the present, and not taking matters beyond himself. And not, there's a psalm, I haven't tried to, I haven't considered matters beyond me. I haven't tried to control tomorrow. I haven't tried to control anyone else. I'm only responsible for my choices and for listening to what the Force calls me to do, and calls me to serve others and serve my fellow Jedi and serve Obi-Wan and Anakin by teaching them and instructing them. Who ends up on his back, his plan unfulfilled? Who ends up becoming one with the Force? Who ends up becoming more powerful than any Sith could possibly imagine? It is this wonderful contrast that, I mean, I'd like to see it explored a little more, explored even more. I know Master and Apprentice, both Masters and Apprentices, both Claudia Gray stories, explore it a little bit, and I appreciate that. but this whole theme of evil as in controlling life, controlling the force, this is really what got me going in this direction, away from a bit more the Taoist neutral perspective on the force, that the force isn't simply life or death, it isn't simply light or dark, it is light, it is life. Death can be incorporated into it if it serves new life. And so
That's
coming back to the
interesting.
sequel trilogy, one of my favorite
Hmm.
moments of the entire saga is on Octo, and
Oh yeah.
Rey reaching out and seeing even darkness and death and decay exists for the sake of new life, and
That's
exists for the sake of something new coming back. And here's the thing, even the death of the Jedi and the end of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire, we don't know what this looks like afterwards, but there is something, this new life that is springing up, in Rey and in Finn and in Poe, that we don't quite know yet, in Luke for a time, and in Anakin for a very short, even shorter time. There is, again, the Force, life is the Jurassic Park thing. Life always finds a way, and even especially when with Darth Venomous, right? Trying to, again, I'm going to repeat this again because this is the moral core of this novel. I think this is the moral core, I think, of what George Lucas is saying. You try and control life and limit it, life is going to force itself back on you, and whether you want to or not, and either you're going to be able to submit to it, or it's going to humiliate you and humble you in ways that you can't choose and can't control. And
it.
yeah, that's
It's
my
funny that
theology time. There's my thought.
it's funny you had the Taoist approach, because if you still did, I probably would have disagreed with you, because I've never agreed with the Taoist approach to the
No,
Force.
well,
I've
yeah,
always
but a
sort
lot
of
of people
thought,
do, and that's the thing.
yeah,
And a lot of people emphasize, and George to some extent has that. It's there. I have to admit, I'm going to a more Western Christian Augustinian view of creation and life. But anyway,
I mean,
go
no,
ahead.
I've always thought that was like the whole thing of the dark side and then the Force. Like, people always say light and
Yeah.
dark. Remember, in the original trilogy, it was just the Force and the dark side.
Mhm.
So you have that.
Yeah.
What was I gonna? And I mean, I'll add Rise of Skywalker in the mix. People always ask, what was this final victory that Yoda was talking about? I think some people have a very, the galaxy just becomes, I don't think the galaxy will ever stop having wars and decay and construction and self-destruction. Who knows? Maybe a New Republic will rise and they'll have a good time and then they'll get destroyed by something else. But that's just society.
It's not an apocalypse. It's not an end times thing.
But I do think when Yoda was talking about it, it's like he's seeing himself as like, hey, I get to be a Force ghost, and you, Palpatine, you need all this medical tech just to keep yourself going before Rey blows you up for the last time. So yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting stuff to go on about that.
Sorry, I just want to say, because that's interesting, because there isn't. So here's a fancy. I'll try not to use the fancy term, but a lot of religious beliefs, religious traditions, their belief in the end times is also intimately connected with beliefs about death and victory for all time. I mean, that whole arc in the Clone Wars is him learning to submit to the will of the Force in order to become a Force ghost. And yeah, I mean, there is this intimate connection. Okay, so we may not ever see the story of what happens when the Star Wars galaxy, the galaxy far, far away, comes to an end, and there is an eternal reign of the light, if that's what that is. I know. I think George Lucas, the original Guardians of the Whills and the story of the Whills, was going in that direction, but I'm glad it doesn't, because that's, I mean, that limits the storytelling potential. But
and the money.
We have Force ghosts. But we have Force ghosts. We have this end time thing of the ultimate destiny of all people, of all beings, to submit to the light, Whether or not they do is up to them. But
And
we have that.
And I'll just add, the Jedi that makes the Jedi immortal. I don't know how Force ghosts work in canon, but I'm gonna just assume they're it's how whatever the story requires. But if 1,000 years, the Jedi Order hasn't been seen, but then one day you get another Force girl who's like interested in lightsabers and Force powers. Nothing stopping the Force ghost Yoda showing up and like, I help you. I can to teach you to Jedi. You can new order we shall have. Compared to Palpatine and the Sith, where it's like, well, he's dead and he's probably stuck in the netherworld of HE double hockey sticks, so or just gone. So his clone body is no longer there. So the Sith are stuck in the in the world of the living. And any thoughts to any of what we're talking about? There's a lot of deep stuff going on.
Yeah, I was just going to mention about like to add to this whole concept is the whole idea of the world between worlds.
Yes,
is an interesting involvement into this discussion. And I don't know what my point. I don't really have a statement to say, but it's just I'm just, as you've been talking about, thinking about. It just changes everything. It just changes everything, and how that relates to the Force, and how the Force, how much of the Force has a plan, the flow of it. But Ezra changed something in the Force with the world between, well, not the Force, but with the events of things, and how that just changes so much.
I agree. They talk about the Force having a will of its own, and like the plan of God. I've always believed in the whole free will thing myself, but I think if the balance of the Force to me is always light side wins, dark side loses. I think that means like, if the Force has a will, let's say, I remember listening to a review of the Thrawn trilogy and talking about, Thrawn also kind of has this whole control the Force thing through science. Kind of sissy, but not as, with the dark, minus a lot of the rituals, just more pure science. But like, the Force does not want Thrawn to win. So that's going to kind of nudge the universe a little bit into like making sure that doesn't happen. Obviously, the Force was, obviously stuff like the Empire will happen, but the Force is like, well, I'm gonna make sure that this doesn't always remain permanent forever. I don't think it's necessarily a lesson to just sit back and just like, well, just let the Force sort of out. Just
that's not how free will and good it works, but
right.
That's not how the Force works.
Exactly, but the Force in the universe does kind of like it will give the good guys a nudge when they're really needing help. And it's interesting. One more thing I had about the Sith is like Sith and Plagueis talk about how the Sith are trying to like change the balance of the Force itself in the direction of the dark side. Like that's how far their experiments are pushing back, and that gets into the whole Anakin thing of like that's the Force. Like, hey, stop messing with me! Smack Sith and Plagueis, and then it's funny. Like Plagueis, when he sees him, he's like, "Oh shoot! I think we might be in trouble, Sidious."
I mean, if backfires their own plan. And Hannah, it's interesting you mentioned World Between Worlds, right? That is a depiction of the unity of the Force as through time. And what do we see? The only time we've really seen it, what do we see is Darth Sidious trying to enter it and manipulate and control it. And thankfully, Ahsoka and Ezra and Morai are there. Morai is there.
Love how Morai's there. That's so random.
Morai as in the daughter, as in the light, as in the avatar of the light, if I can use the term avatar, to stop him. And but interesting enough, then to bring it back to the Darth Plagueis novel, that's an example
in this book, I think.
Well, that's an example in canon of, and well after Plagueis was written and after the Disney changeover and the canon changeover, of Darth Sidious trying to actually control the Force and manipulate it, probably bend it to the dark. I mean, we don't fully know what he's up to there, but can't be any good. It's got to be up to no good. And my mind, when I watched that, I was like, oh, he's trying to do something of cosmic significance here, and something that James Luceno laid out in this Legends novel.
If you want another good example, watch the Lucasfilm's parent company movie, The Lion King, The Circle of Life.
Sure.
Yeah, well, Foz is like, the animals die, they become grass, and animals eat the grass, and we hunt them. So, and then when Scar starts over hunting with the hyenas, it all goes to heck because Scar has embraced the dark side of his own ego and destroys the balance in the circle of life.
Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hamlet.
Yeah, I'll share that scene, Matthew. I think you'll agree it's the Force.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean that's Rey on Octo, right? Death.
Yeah.
Leading to new life. But if you serve death, like Kylo Ren, or like the Sith, or you think you can
I don't think you
manipulate life
serve
and
death.
death.
I think if you defy it.
Yeah, or if you manipulate life and death, you kill others in order to preserve your own life. That upsets the balance, and that tries to defy limits, but then snaps back on you because we're all mortal.
Right. We've talked about this guy a little bit, but I want to get into the apprentices, and not Palpatine, the other apprentices, Count Dooku and Darth Maul. They're in this book. I've always thought that if Legends had continued, James Luceno would have done a Dooku book. I feel like I feel like that would have been the sequel to Plagueis.
Yeah.
So Count Dooku's in this book. We see him a couple times, first talking to Hugo Damask, and then to Palpatine. First big difference between Legends and Canon is Count Dooku is not in league with Sidious by the time of Phantom Menace. He does not know that Palpatine and Sidious are the same person. He's still with the Order too. The Qui-Gon's death would have been is the final straw. Hannah, what were your thoughts on, I guess, seeing Count Dooku? I mean, we talked a lot about Darth Maul, but how was your thoughts on seeing Count Dooku again? Especially in light of Tales of the Jedi, a little bit of Bad Batch, and just more Dooku fun.
Yeah, it was super fun to even hear Sereno in this book. I was like, wow, we were just here. I think it was the same week that Bad Batch. We were the premiere, and I had just read the bit that they were at Sereno, or the following week, and I was like, oh wow, we're here now. I think that's really cool. Yeah, it is interesting how, obviously, in the non-canon of it, that's like it's one of the only very few things that isn't that couldn't work canonically of the timing of everything. But yeah, I find it really interesting how they start to show that relationship there, that Plagueis actually knew Sifo-Dyas and Dooku, and kind of flagged it. Oh, hang on. No, he didn't. He didn't mention it to Palpatine. Did he? I can't remember now. And then Palpatine got to know them as well and met them at a few things, and kind of how those relationships started to happen. And it's so cool to see, especially with Dooku, his his kind of musings about the Jedi Order was I found fairly in line with what he was saying in Tales of the Jedi. So I thought that was a really that worked for me. And Sifo-Dyas, I know nothing about him except for his name in Attack of the Clones. So that was really cool to have him a little bit in a couple of conversations and what he's up to, and how they kind of really coerced him to be like, you're doing the right thing if you do this thing, which is really fascinating. But I love these two characters. I wish they were in it. Probably not in this book more because I think it was well balanced. But I elsewhere if they are.
Yeah, I wish James Luceno got to write that Dooku novel, because in Legends we don't really have a story of when Dooku became Darth Tyrannus. So that would have been interesting. I feel like he was building up to a sequel. I mean, Tarkin's kind of an unofficial sequel to this book, some ways. Matthew, do you remember anything about Dooku from this book in particular?
Not necessarily. I mean, I do know. Yeah, I mean and also reading the recaps and the Wikipedia article. Yeah, I mean, well, it makes sense. It fits everything in line with the Trade Federation, the Separatists, and the Clone Wars. But also, I mean, well, it's interesting. You had the quote from Plagueis about the corruption of the Jedi and how that lines up with what we see of Dooku in canon. All I'll say, Hannah, is if you haven't listened to Dooku Jedi Lost yet, you definitely need to. That should be your next. Just skip High Republic. Just start with that first.
That's it's Ventress and Quinlan Voss is in that one, right?
That's Dark Disciples.
Dark
That's Dark Disciples.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Ventress is in Dooku Jedi Lost. Yes.
Yeah, season
But
2. Not
that really goes into a lot of this in canon. Calvin Scott, in that way, you want to say, Joel, that it would be nice if James Luceno had written a sequel. That's a worthy sequel. That's a worthy, not sequel, but companion, if you will, exploration of Dooku's story. Some things, not entirely lining up with Tales of the Jedi, but not entirely off either. I will say, also in Yoda, the Yoda comic that Kevin Scott is writing, the next issue, number 3, is going, or number 4, is going to be a young Dooku story. So that's exciting too. But or not young yet, like youngish, like Knight Dooku. Yoda is gonna ask for his help. Probably something to do with Tales of the Jedi. But yeah, again, it's hard to remember too much about what I originally read with Dooku, but it seemed. I wonder if it was. I vaguely recall feeling both surprised and, oh, this is fitting, given how this novel is tying everything up together and showing everything about the whole prequel trilogy. So made sense that he is in there. Yeah, I can't really remember too much more. It was a while ago, and he's not that major of a character in this book. So,
and the interesting thing about this book is that it ties in so nicely with a lot of pre-established Legends events, like Newt Gunray coming to power because of a little mini war that happened. That was a fun little moment. Palpatine's Jedi friend, the Doriyama family. So that's from the comics,
right? Man, they assassinated so many people in this book. So many, just every chapter is someone else.
Yeah.
Maybe you remember, Matthew, but did they say if in canon is the person who was before Padme, was it a queen or a king? Do they say specifically?
King Varuna?
No, in canon.
In canon, I'm trying to remember.
Because in Legends, it is a king. It is King
we've
Varuna.
Actually gone, I think she's a queen. I think that's that's a difference. Is in E.K. Johnson's in Queen's Peril. Yeah, Queen's Peril.
Yeah, but that's actually a good question. I didn't even put in my notes. But Hannah, what did you think of Naboo politics with King Varuna and the plasma and the Trade Federation?
Yeah.
I loved it. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of this book, is just the workings of it all and how everything was so orchestrated. What Plagueis was doing, what Damask Holdings, who they sided with and who they backed, and then years later, that came to oh well, you're in power now, so I'm gonna do this now. So it was just so well complex, but making sense. But it was just so well thought out. It was just, again, it's one of those things where it's as much as Palpatine thought everything through many years in advance, so did Plagueis. He just, everything was so well laid out. It was just amazing. But yeah, I love that whole notion in this book of the Naboo politics.
Yes.
It's interesting that one thing I found interesting, I guess we could talk about this a little bit too. I want to squeeze as much as anything possible because there's so much in it. I don't even see one podcast you ever truly cover this book do justice. But
we could have a whole episode on Naboo politics in this anyway.
I probably could if I tried
Yeah.
hard enough. But it's interesting, and this is kind of more of a Legends thing. I don't feel like canon goes as deep as Legends, but it's interesting. The last two Siths before Palpatine, and really, I guess most of the Siths before Palpatine are all aliens. You got Tenebrous is Abyss, Plagueis is the Moon, and then Palpatine's a human. Bane is, I think, a human, and Xana might be a human. But afterwards, it's kind of aliens. And Plagueis is one of the reasons why I think he makes Palpatine Chancellor, because he's very much, the future will belong to humans. He's kind of aware that Palpatine as a human is sort of the kind of the humans are the ascendants right now. But in Legends, a lot of it I think is because in Legends the Empire was a full-on anti-alien, xenophobic, human supremacist empire. And I think in canon they don't show a lot of that as much as you think.
Might be a little distasteful in our current climate.
Maybe.
I don't know, but
I don't know. I mean, maybe it'd be nice. I mean, they're the bad guys, so it's not.
Yeah,
It's not
it
like,
would be. It would
not like the
be
rebellion.
good
It's like if
point.
the rebellion were anti-alien, it's like what the heck going on here? But
Yeah, that's fair.
But
Yeah.
they talk about like why a lot of the alien and hive species are going to be the major players
Mhm.
in the separatist
Yes,
and rank up that sentiment. I don't know.
which is
I just
pretty good.
think that's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
Well, to say, it's not that human ascendancy is the future; it's the present. I mean,
Right.
these grievances that the Outer Rim have with the core, they've
Mhm.
been going on for centuries, and I
Mm.
mean, High Republic is exploring them to some
Mhm.
extent, not fully, but exploring the beginnings of them, the stirrings of them, in canon. Yeah, I gather in Legends. I mean, Legends never delved into that weird middle period a couple centuries back, but yeah, like you said, I mean, the Empire is a human centric organization. That doesn't happen overnight. you know,
Right.
Nazi Germany doesn't happen overnight. The anti-Semitic anti-Semitic views for centuries. Um, so yeah, there's that little bit. Yeah. Talking about the Nuba politics, though. Just going back to that question, the taxation of outlying trade routes. People slept on that. People literally slept on that. People thought, well, that's boring. I don't want to hear about taxation of trade routes. And then James Luceno comes and writes this brilliant novel with, again, when
I mean, that should have been on
Qui-Gon,
George for making it interesting.
yeah, but I thought it was interesting anyway. But Luceno fleshes it out again, talking about
Oh yeah. Plasma.
exploring what George's vision here is of the way economics and politics have these more cosmic implications, have these moral implications. What are all these heavily industrial chambers doing where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are fighting Maul? What are they doing in the bowels of Theed? Well, isn't this supposed to be this pastoral, idyllic city in harmony with its natural surroundings? What's happening there? What the taxation of outlying trade routes about? Energy policy, and the tensions, these real world tensions over oil that cause all this conflict, that allow evil to fester, allow self-interested parties to rise to power and manipulate everyone else. Yeah, it and to see again how planned out, Hannah, you were saying how planned out, how charted out this was. Again, brilliant, cheering for the bad guy. We're excited to suspend our moral belief and say, oh, that's really awesome, really cool. Of course, coming back into the real world, it's not, but fun to explore. I mean, we gotta have a little bit of fun with it. And then
Speaking of
come back.
aliens and politics, I think it's funny. Young Palpatine's like Gungans. They suck. We should kill them all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was funny. He did not like the Gungans.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, about one more thing about politics, Hannah. What did you think about Chancellor Valorum, Palpatine's predecessor? Good old Valorum.
Oh,
See him.
He got the short end of the stick, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. He really was shoved out in the end. He couldn't really do much about it, and again, all part of the master plan. It makes both Plagueis and Palpatine to be such great evils of how they orchestrated that. That's just so clever. But yeah, Valorum, what a guy!
Poor Finis.
What a guy! I thought he was actually going to be in it a little more than he was. He was only in a couple conversations near the start-ish of the book, and then it was only when he was getting kicked out, he kind of came back into it. But I don't know. I'm a sympathizer for Valorum. I'm on his side.
Poor fella. Poor fella.
I just want to say, I mean, again, the genius of this book, I'm going to hold that up. One of the geniuses of the book is the way it takes 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, spins a whole yarn about it, spins a whole story plot point about it, marred and baseless accusations of corruption. Okay, so let's go into how Palpatine himself orchestrates these baseless accusations of corruption and frames Valorum for all this goings on. Of course, then Palpatine can publicly deny or publicly say, "Oh, poor Valorum, poor Finis. He's mired in these baseless accusations of corruption that I happen to plant." There's that bit. Also, enter the bureaucrats, the true power of the Republic. Something Palpatine himself here's the thing. He causes the problem that he then promises to fix. And that is his ultimate plan,
So
is
smart.
to say, the Republic is at a standstill. It is incapable of taking care of my people, of the Naboo people, of anyone's people, especially in the Outer Rim. I'm going to come in with a strong hand and root out all these corrupt evildoers from the galaxy that I helped set up, and that is my Sith Master, and that is. I'm gonna then actually during the Empire pull the strings on and tug on and control, less even the Underworld to some extent, but especially all the financial institutions and shipbuilding institutions and energy institutions. I'm going to go ahead and nationalize them so as to fund my war machine. And
actually,
yeah.
You actually brought up one more great point. I see this book has so many layers. I can bring up so many points. Hannah, what did you think of the Underworld? We got to see Gardula the Hutt. We got to see Jabba.
Yeah.
We got to see. You got to see all. Well, I think Shizor gets a mention.
What's the Malastair guy called? What's his name?
Grand Senator
Grand?
I think so.
Yeah.
This was a trivia question in the canon trivia question.
Senator X. What do you think about Plagueis and actually it's only Plagueis who deals with Jabba and Gardula the Hutt. In the
yeah. That was such a great story, and I think it really made me think of oddly the Book of Boba Fett, and how much there's obviously not like a Plagueis storyline, but there's so much storyline in the dealings of the Underworld, the Hutts, the gangs, the mafia, the dealings that happen there, that is just so fascinating, and the ramifications of each thing. Like, you don't really think of pod racing being like a big ticket in the Underworld, like who controls what, but like that was a big thing. And what had happened? Plagueis, was it he funded the race course on Malastair, or
he funded on Malastair? And then on Gardula went to Tatooine. The Jabba was trying to out Gardula. Which, fun fact, that storyline actually comes from a video game, the Star Wars Bounty Hunter video game, where you play as Jango Fett, and you deal with the Bando Gora, which was the villain, because Kamari Vosa was Count Dooku's apprentice, who was the Jedi who went crazy. Which is all mentioned in that book with Jabba. So that's the Bando Gora, Vosa, and Count Dooku all come from that video game, and that was recontextualized in the book.
Well, I love this. I love that kind of story, and I think I want more of it. That's what I kind of envisaged the Book of Boba Fett to be, and I hope. Side note: I hope we get a season 2, and I hope it is that it's just like mafia gangs, who rules what, and all that kind of stuff. But no, in this book, I think that was such a great. It was a great vessel to show how manipulative Plagueis was, but he was a great businessman. Like he worked in a bank, like that was his day job, like working in a bank and making deals, and he was good at it. He was very, very good at it. So I love this facet of this book. It's really, really good.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna say something, Matthew?
Yeah, well, I was gonna go for the Venn diagram again. Back to the Venn diagram. So you think of the racing sports as just this fun side, leisure thing. It is an embedded part of culture, and culture is embedded in history of a place and of a people. I think, Hannah, you mentioned, I think you were asking, want to know more about the Boon to Eve. Keep listening to Plagueis, right? Keep reading Plagueis. Because it's this layered, realistic understanding of how this major race can emerge from all these political dealings and these mystical beliefs, and that is something that I just remember from reading it as a surprising thing out of the Underworld, but also the Underworld is kind of just taken over it. Yeah, because on Tatooine, where's the difference? The line between Underworld and legit leadership, legit business, it doesn't really exist. So I really loved, again, adding another depth to this fun scene in the Phantom Menace, everything going on behind the scenes, under the surface. And sports is always a part of that. Sports is always the dirty business of sports that is intimately connected with our beliefs about power and money, and how much should we allow people to make all the money in the world. Just a side note, this is all aside. I was watching an Apple TV documentary about European Super League last year. The most wealthiest people in world football were saying, we're going to create our own little league, and that all got forced back because people had this huge outcry of, how dare you do something just for all the money. The Boutique is like kind of the Super League thing of embedded in, and even the response to it, in that not so much like the Super League, but like the way we all feel about these sporting events is connected to how we feel about our home, and how we feel about our planet, and how we feel about business and money and power and community and local community. And for Anakin Skywalker, the local boy to win, that's a huge deal.
Boy.
Local boy, huh?
So I mean, how many players from Central Coast are from that part of Australia?
That's a good point.
And it's a bigger deal when they, he's one of our own. He's one of our. Anyway, so
It's such a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Gone on for 2 hours. I think maybe we'll be wrapping up soon. I just want to get a few more points in. We could go on this book all day, but I don't want to keep everyone here forever. As much as I would try.
I gotta go to bed eventually.
Eventually. I just want. I've talked about this throughout the book, but I'll just list a couple of details from Legends that don't quite line up with Canon. Palpatine getting Maul. I think that was his actual mother, but in canon, his mother is Mother Talzin, is a direct thing. Dooku, obviously.
Really? Mother Talzin's his actual mother?
Yeah, that's in Son of Dathomir. That's in the comic book. That's canon.
No way.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's the actual mother. I don't think it's just the title. It's actually, I think that's his actual son. That's their actual son, Darth Maul.
That's
I gotta read
amazing.
that again. I don't quite remember that. I believe you, but yeah.
I
believe you.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was more like Talzin and Palpatine were like I don't want to say a thing, but they definitely had a partnership. And then Palpatine took Maul and was like, Nee, I'm out of here. Nee, I'm taking this kid. Check with you. I learned your secrets. Dooku, obviously, his timeline doesn't quite line up with this book anymore. What else did I put here? I put Plagueis being alive during Phantom Menace. I put question mark because nothing's discerned that, but also I just get the feeling that that's probably not the case
Again,
anymore.
it's a little wonky. But...
And obviously, you answered this question for me, Mark, and before Padme was the queen in canon, and in Legends it's King Verona.
And a queen in the similar mold to Padme, a young, idealistic, but also compelling queen.
They make the Naboo politics a lot more cynical in this book.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Cutthroat.
James Luceno does. Yeah.
That's true. But I do think this book still holds a lot of sway and influence in terms of Sith lore. Palpatine wanting to be immortality, although that goes back to Dark Empire, so that's not anything here nor there. Plagueis as a character himself and his importance, kind of as the one who trained Palpatine himself. Anna, you talked about how you felt a lot of this book could have been, canonized. Is there anything in particular from canon from this book you would want to see directly put back into the canon, like mentioned, or like even down to Plagueis being alive during the Phantom Menace, if you want to make that your answer.
Right.
Anything in particular?
I really love this whole ongoing concept of the Sith want to be immortal and they just won't ever figure it out. I love that whole kind of concept. So I actually hope they thread, maybe if they mention something about Plagueis's research, or if we see Palpatine in bad, like this won't be happening, but hypothetically, Palpatine mentioned something about, continuing his master's work, in Bad Batch, and or even in Mando, if we see, we've seen some things. We saw the lab on Navarro, but seeing something to do with Plagueis' work being elsewhere down the timeline, and Palpatine continuing that, and it being like a direct link of like, my master spent like years, decades on this. I'm going to try and figure it out myself, and yeah, connect that to the sequels and continue that to the sequels. Anything else in no, what, you know what? I'm very excited for the show Acolyte.
Oh, yeah.
And reading this, I'm like, surely they wouldn't completely ignore this book exists. I as in, I think, is Acolyte meant to be 100 years?
Yeah, about 100 years.
Before the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So
Plagueis would be a teenager or at least a little baby, depending on how old he.
Well, we never know.
He says his age. He tells Palpatine he's like 100 and something or something. I don't know.
Moons live a long time. They're at least he's
especially the dark side is a pathway to some abilities can be considered to be unnatural. So
that's true. That's true.
Bad alien expectancies.
Yeah, true. So I don't know. I don't know how or where they could connect something in Acolyte to Plagueis. Maybe, even something as just maybe some of the groups or some of the senatorial people we meet in Plagueis that is in Acolyte or something like that. I really hope there is a connection with this book and Acolyte.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's the idea of Sith seeking immortality, which has always been a thing since Dark Empire. Dark Empire. There's our next Legends look back.
Sure.
But
I'll definitely have to read the Wikipedia article for that one.
You can find it online. I think it's not that expensive on Amazon. I think that's definitely something from the book. I mean, I think you could easily fit in a lot of just the machinations of Palpatine and Plagueis, even if Plagueis isn't even alive during the Phantom Menace timeline, just to kind of like, oh, Palpatine did this and did that and placed New Gunray in the Viceroy chair. I think a lot of that can kind of, a lot of those smaller details could probably still stifle themselves out. I guess, Matthew, same question. Anything from particular from this book that you want to see directly impact canon, like a person, a Plagueis being alive during Phantom Menace? If you want to make that your answer.
I mean, I'm neither here nor there on that one. I'll say the philosophies, the idea of Sith wanting to be immortal and control the Force. I think that's already there. It's already in canon. I think it's already what George was saying, even from A New Hope. So I'm not too concerned. I do think that is partly at least implied. What's going on with Mount Tantus, what's going on with Rise of Skywalker, what's going on with Pershing, the guy you interviewed, all that stuff. Yeah, great interview. Check it out. By the way, I mean that's kind of an open secret there. So what I would really love to see, I've talked about House of Cards a lot. House of Cards writers were on Andor. Give me the politics. Show me in a book, in a comic, in a Charles Soule long run comic book. I don't care. Give me all that machinations and all. Yeah, like you said, machinations, but specifically the politics and economics of it. That is the biggest loss of this not being canon is we don't have all those details specifically. I mean, we can imagine, we can say, oh yeah, there's still headcanon. I would love, that's the thing I want the most out of this is, what is, with the rise of the Separatists and the Clone Army. And again, we have some of that with Duke of Jedi Lost, but everything Palpatine is up to with the Senate. Show us that. I mean, just as much as I want to know what Mon Mothma is up to in the New Republic Senate and in the Imperial Senate, I want to know what Palpatine is up to in the Republic Senate, and Plagueis too, and with the Banking Clan, and the Sandhill and them, and those details, because books, I think Ike Johnston start to go there for a much younger audience that can't really necessarily handle that much detail or follow that much detail. And, and she did a great job. And talking about the type of bills that Palpatine starts to pass that or put forward that just preparing other bills that can lead on to that. We see a little bit in the Clone Wars, but I want the full bore, the full shebang, and I want a lawyer named Charles Soule to write it, or James Luceno together. Like put them
I
together.
wouldn't mind James Luceno came back. I'm surprised he has.
But we know. Here's the thing: we know Charles Soule has on his shelf the original pitch that he gave to Lucasfilm of a young Palpatine story. I gather a lot of it is the mystical, weird, evil stuff, but we've seen him. I mean, he wrote a She-Hulk comic that has some influence, some spiritual influence on the Disney Plus show. Give me a Disney Plus show with Charles Soule.
Acolytes. So.
I know, but I mean the politics of it with Palpatine and the legal drama, the political thriller of Palpatine. I think there's an appetite for it still. I know there needs to be a more aspirational through line because we're tired of cynicism, but I think that can come back in a tasteful and juicy way.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've already mentioned the things that no longer work, but I feel like I kind of find it interesting, this book, probably because of when it came out, and also because of how big it is. It's kind of, in a bigger sense, not being touched to not be completely contradicted. I mean, again,
I agree, yeah.
But I think it's
and
like
it's so late too.
And that too,
yeah.
like I think I can see why there's like, we kind of don't want to touch this because this book is still fresh. I mean, it's been 10 years. I mean, it's still fresh, kind of fresh enough, and still kind of so definitive in a lot of fans' minds. It's like, why revert the wheel? I mean, in a sense, not maybe later down the line. A few more questions for Hannah. Don't worry, we're wrapping up soon. I just have a few more questions. I mentioned that this book at the beginning is very much a culmination of 30 years of Star Wars legends. You probably notice a lot of names being dropped, a lot of Sith Lords, a lot of planets, a lot of people. Are there any ones that you were interested? I remember that you were like, where this comes from, or like anything that stood out to you of like, oh, that's an interesting name, or that's an interesting idea. Like, is this a Legends thing? Was there anything that like stood out to you?
Well, a lot of the names I've heard before, and kind of like how I knew of Plagueis and where he fits. A lot of the names I've known, but Darth Tenebris was really interesting. He was a really interesting character to me. I was like keen for him to be in the book, but it makes sense that he died so early on to kind of set up Plagueis' story, but because oddly, I don't think that was actually a name I had heard prior to reading this book. But the other names mentioned in there, I've actually heard. I think I can't think of anyone that I met for the first time in this book. But Darth Tenebris, is definitely a character I want to know more about.
There's an interesting short story in Star Wars Insider called "The Tenebris Way." If I find it, I'll send it to your way. But I guess just my last question would be, now that you've taken your first step into a Legends world, where do you kind of want to take your next step in the Legends world? Have you have an idea? Or is there something you're particularly looking for? Maybe I can
you announce it exclusively?
That too?
Well, I can. You know what? You are the paper cannon Legends. I'm pretty certain. I can be swayed, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to continue with I'm going to start the Thrawn books next, because
the Legends books, right?
I have a whole theory. Sorry.
The Legends Thrawn books? I don't want to skip there too.
Well, that's what I'm open to. I'm open to, because it's like, well, this was going to be my Legends read through, so I feel like I've got to start with Thrawn Legends and then read the Thrawn canon, right?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Because Tim Zahn kind of considers that all still in his own head canon.
Right. So yeah, I think that he's his Legends trilogy is probably what's on my list next because I've got a strong theory that we might even be seeing Thrawn in the end of Mando, at least a little just appearance or just name drop again. And obviously we're going to be seeing him in Ahsoka, which is like literally this year. So I definitely want to get around those books to, as much as I've seen Rebels, seen all of Thrawn and Rebels, there is so much more to him, which I want to
the Empire, the first one.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, is that the first of the Legends?
Yeah. First Legends Thrawn book, Heir to the Empire.
There you go. Well, that's the next book.
And that's actually a good start to the post-Endor era, because it's really the easiest jumping on point, because then it gets really really interesting and it just kind of keeps on going and going and going and going and going, never stops. So it's like if you want to kind of know what
stops, Joel. It stops with the Disney takeover.
It did stop eventually. But yeah, if you kind of want to know what the post Return of the Jedi era in Legends is like, Heir of the Empire, 1991 is a great place to start, and I would be more than happy to have you come back and talk about that book, because that's another favorite of mine.
I mean, that's interesting. So here's the way I see it. So Heir to the Empire, or the original Thrawn trilogy, that one is gonna probably have, again, it's like a spiritual influence on the Mandoverse in a way. It's not gonna line up, but set around the same time. The Canon Thrawn trilogy is integrated into Rebels in a way, in a pretty good way. They're effectively tie-in novels to Rebels.
Right.
In not in some ways more than others, but some ways are from. I mean, there are characters that come in, but so that is an interesting thing. It's just different time periods that Thrawn shows up in Legends and Canon. But
I mean, I think it'll be hard for them to be connected to the Mandoverse, Heir of the Empire, because Ahsoka's not going to be in it.
Well, there's that. That's true.
Ahsoka's not born yet. She's not even just a kernel in Filoni's head. Filoni probably just a teenager at that point too, or something.
She might have been a kernel. You never know.
That's true. You never know. He might have had this idea for a long time. But we're getting close to 2 hours and 30 minutes. This has probably been another long one. But Hannah, thank you for reading this book. I have been looking for an excuse to do some Legends look backs here, and this was my best opportunity to do it. Yes. With this particular book, Plagueis. It's funny, you did. I'm really glad that you really liked it, because I had another friend who read this book first and tried in Legends. I'm like, I got a little confused. Like, this is always one I would recommend last for people who want to get into Legends, but I'm glad it worked for you in terms of like the first thing you did, like, because this is kind of like going into the deep end of the pool, while Thrawn trilogy is more like the shallow end of the pool. Not in like a bad way. I'm just like,
I found maybe it's just because I'm a massive Phantom Menace fan, but I found it really easy to get into this book because it's just a little pre-Phantom Menace prequel, essentially.
Midi-chlorians are mentioned every other page,
right?
I didn't get much time to talk. We talked a lot about the midi-chlorians already, so I'm okay.
We could do a whole episode on midi-chlorians.
I agree with DK notes here. The midi-chlorians I think are like the best they've ever been handled. Here we go. One more Plagueis quote before we leave. Plagueis says, "A common misconception held that the midi-chlorians were force-carrying particles, when in fact they function more as translators, interlocutors of the will of the Force." So yeah, gotta love that midi-chlorian. But I'm really glad you love this book, Hannah. I do think it is one of those books that, be it Legends, I think it does kind of give you greater appreciation of the prequel. That's always what I've heard from people who kind of like have hesitancy of the prequels, but don't outright reject them conceptually. So it helps them with that.
I mean, it did more than that for me. It made me fall in love.
This book really is one of the few really good books that like dive into what's it like to be a Sith, and kind of comes close to like, this is what a Sith character with a bit more nuance than just your typical Palpatine evil and chaos character would be like. I'm so excited we got to have this conversation. This was fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. No, yeah, thank you for having me on. This was I feel like I needed to like talk out all the concepts and things I read to be like, this is what I think of the book. Because you read a book and you just go, okay, that's the end. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these thoughts on it. So
I'll say this.
Great.
I'll say this. Like, if Plagueis is like a more Andor-y kind of with lots of ideas and concepts and just kind of really got to talk it out, I will say Thrawn trilogy and Heir of the Empire, starting with Heir of the Empire, is more Mando in that. I mean, I don't want to turn this too much. I mean, I'll just give you my warning. It's like, because the Thrawn trilogy and the beauty of that book is Tim Zahn really captures just that original trilogy fun adventure feel. But obviously with new things added, like Thrawn, of course. So it'll be interesting when you read it, because like there's going to be very much a tonal shift. It's like if this one was kind of like the dark, dreary, but also a lot of fun to just evil characters. The Thrawn trilogy is a lot more just classic Star Wars fun adventure. Here's Luke, Han, and Leia having adventure post Endor.
Right.
The range of Star Wars novels, period, but Legends specifically, and all the fun. Right on.
I love it.
Fun times. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. And thanks everyone for joining us in the comments. Let us know what you thought of this incredible novel or anything else we talked about. Comment below or let us know on Twitter or Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, or on the Underworld Facebook page, or wherever it is you're watching this episode. Please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I'll offer my thanks and say thanks for coming on, sharing your thoughts. As always, you're welcome anytime. And so, thank you. And where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at The Race Side. That's RAE Side on everything. On YouTube, on Twitter, and Instagram at The Race Side. Having lots of fun over there. What am I doing this week? This week, tomorrow, I will be reading through the Attack of the Clones visual diaries. Very, very interesting stuff. So that'll be doing
visual diaries
live tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right on. Visual dictionaries or visual diaries?
Dictionaries. Did I say diaries?
Yeah, I wonder about that.
Does that even exist?
Probably.
George Lucas's diaries.
Dictionaries. And I say plural. There's only one. There's only one visual dictionary. Yes. But I also have it's kind of like a sister book to it, where it's called the cross sections.
Yes.
Where it's like all the ships and things like that. So yes, that's what we're doing. Not diaries. Imagine that.
Yes.
Dear diary from Padme. Today I saw Anakin. Oh man.
This is what he looks like. I'm gonna scribble.
I mean, have you ever get like a book called? I mean, there's a book called The Book of Sith. I have it in my bookshelf. Yeah. And it's kind of like a journal diary, and they even have like all the characters like Sidious and Luke and like Vader. Like
like the Jedi Path.
Yeah.
And there's the Rebel one as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love those books.
On that note, Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID2021 on Twitter. Again, JID2021 on Twitter, or at Ion Canon Pod, as you see below, where I will post long tweets about stuff, mostly Star Wars stuff.
Some pretty great threads, gotta say. You can find me on Twitter, NEUG45. Toronto FC season's coming up, so I'm probably gonna get a lot of tweets on that. Of course, more Star Wars, Star Trek, all that's fun stuff. On Instagram, MNEUG1138. You can see me doing some wild churchy stuff too there, if you want. And of course, at Iron Cannon Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, full episodes, and of course Tractor Beam. Hopefully every Friday I can get those out as well. And of course the flagship at the SWU and the flagship podcast Thursday nights. Check that out as well. All right, so next week, Joel, as promised, we are returning to Malachor with some good old-fashioned fan theories on what the Jedi Sith War might be. It's hopefully not going to be. It's going to be dark. It's kind of building on the darkness and the brooding of the Plagueis, but more speculating on Legends lore and canon lore, and just what might be, what we know and what we don't know, and what we hope will happen. So
back when the Sith wore armor instead of cloaks.
Yes, and again, super weapons powered by crystals and all that fun stuff. But until then, Hannah, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.